evening and welcome to this CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026. I'm Omar Sejinina.
And I'm Vashi Capellos. It is decision day in 3 key ridings, 2 in Ontario and 1 in Quebec.
And Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberals need just 1 seat to form a majority government.
Voters in 2 Toronto ridings and the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne have just under 90 minutes to cast their ballots before polls close.
And our reporters have got you covered tonight. CTV's Heather Wright and Adrian Gabriel are in the Toronto ridings of University-Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest. And CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is in Terrebonne.
From the field to the studio, we have comprehensive coverage as the night unfolds.
And CTV national news anchor Heather Butts and pollster Nick Nanos are here to break down the numbers and to provide you with the context. And our Ottawa Bureau Chief Graham Richardson will help make sense of it all and talk about what tonight means for the country. CTV national news anchor Sandy Ronaldo leads our political panel. That includes former Liberal MP and Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister Marco Mendicino, former Conservative Cabinet Minister and CTV News political analyst James Moore, and former NDP MP and Provincial Minister Nathan Cullen.
We have also convened a special edition of our strategy panel with former Liberal senior advisor and CTV political analyst Scott Reid, Conservative strategist Shakira Chambers, and Monk & Associates Kathleen Monk, who served as communications director for the late NDP leader Jack Layton. We're going to bring everyone into the conversation in just a moment. First, though, let's take a look at exactly how we got here. Just shy, if you can believe it, of a year ago, the Liberals won the general election and formed a minority government with 169 seats. That's 3 shy of a majority. The Conservatives landed at 144 seats, the Bloc at 22, the NDP at 7, and the Greens at 1. But a whole lot has happened since then, and those numbers have changed, with 5 MPs crossing the floor to join the Liberals in the same number of months since November. Among them, 4 Conservatives, including Marilyn Gladue just last week, and 1 NDP MP.
It certainly has been a very active year and an active few weeks, actually. That should have been enough to push them over the edge, but there have been 3 Liberal vacancies as well, triggering tonight's by-elections. Longtime Liberal Cabinet Minister and former Deputy PM Chrystia Freeland resigned in University-Rosedale. Former Cabinet Minister Bill Blair stepped down in the riding of Scarborough Southwest to become Canada's High Commissioner to the UK. And in Quebec, Liberal Tatiana Auguste won the riding of Terrebonne in last year's federal election by just 1 vote over her Bloc Québécois opponent. But the country's top court later nullified the result.
So here's where things therefore stand going into these by-elections tonight. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals are sitting at 171 seats, just 1 seat away from that magic number of 172 needed to form a majority government. The Conservatives are sitting at 140 seats, the Bloc at 22, the NDP at 6, and the Greens at 1.
We're going to bring you our countdown clock now, and we are just over an hour and a half until polls close. You can see that clock to the bottom right of your screen, and that's the current seats standings per party right now. Let's head out to the polling stations where voting is underway, starting with the downtown Toronto riding of University-Rosedale, where we find CTV's Heather Wright. Heather, describe the atmosphere for us.
Well, Omar, we're here at a polling station at the University of Toronto. We've been here for several hours now, sort of seeing some peaks and valleys when it comes to turnout. We are seeing a lot of students coming in and also people, obviously, who live nearby. And those that we've spoken with, you know, they say the important part about coming out to vote in a by-election is having their voices heard. The issues that are important to them really vary depending on who we are talking to. Cost of living is up there, Canada's position in the world, and of course the trade war with the United States. Now, as you mentioned in the intro, this is a riding that is considered to be a Liberal stronghold. This riding has been held by Chrystia Freeland since 2015, the year it was created, and it was created by hiving off parts of other ridings that have typically gone Liberal in the last several years. That would be Toronto Centre and Trinity Spadina, which was, though, however, held by current Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow for the NDP for a number of years. So this is a riding that includes one of the wealthiest neighbourhoods, Rosedale, in the entire country, along with large swaths of downtown Toronto. People coming out to the polls, casting their ballots, hoping to have their voices heard. One man telling us that he did not want to be a bystander in this election.
All right, Heather, we'll check in with you throughout the evening. And now another riding that's considered a Liberal stronghold is the riding of Scarborough Southwest, and that is where we find CTV's Adrian Gabriel. Adrian, what can you tell us?
Omar, the Liberal candidate here in Scarborough Southwest, well, she's a well-known commodity in this neighborhood, though before this, she was an MPP and the deputy leader of the provincial NDP party here in Ontario. Dolly Begum, of course, is who we're speaking about. And interestingly enough, she jumped ship, joining the Liberals as a candidate. She is expecting to win here tonight. Now, here at this polling station, it's been a little bit quiet today. We've seen this evening as a few more people starting to come in, speaking with some voters who are saying that they're here tonight. They want to support Mark Carney. Others saying they want to come out here and exercise their democratic right. Though speaking with some of the staff inside, they say it's been a little quieter today at this polling station than it was when people came on Easter Monday for early voting. About 10,000 people, a little more than 10,000 people came out at that time to cast their ballots. Now, this is an interesting riding for multiple reasons. It's also one of the most multicultural in the city of Toronto. About 64% have registered as visible minorities, South Asian, Black, Filipino being the top three. And Dolly Begum, the Liberal candidate, also interestingly enough, was the first ever Bangladeshi Canadian to ever be elected to office in Canadian history. She's well placed here tonight. There is a banquet hall across the street from where we are tonight where she hopes to celebrate a little later on, that we're going to have to wait and see.
All right, Adrian, thank you. And again, bottom right of your screen, polls closing in about an hour and 20 minutes. Let's head over to CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin in the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne. And this is where, Geneviève, all the political drama seems to be centered tonight. Certainly appears to be a motivated electorate. We know that about 18,200 people have cast their ballots in advance voting, which represents about 20% of that voter pool. So people certainly appears that they want to be made heard tonight.
Oh, absolutely, Omar. It hasn't been really entirely busy. There haven't been lineups here, but it has been a steady trickle of people coming in and out of the polling station wanting to make their voices heard. Many of them telling me they want a clear winner tonight. The Bloc Québécois slogan for this by-election is un vote qui compte, a vote that counts. And that is certainly something that people are taking to heart here. They know that this riding was won by just one vote last time around, and so they certainly believe that what they're putting in the polling station today is going to matter at the end when the votes are counted. There's also the fact, of course, that this is one of the ridings that has been hotly contested for so long. There's been a dozen or so, more than 24 MPs that have come to this riding, knocking on doors, trying to convince voters to support their party. We even saw just a few minutes ago, Industry Minister Mélanie Joly was here. She was here shaking some hands. We talked to her about the situation here, and she says that she wants to make sure that people vote, they make their voices heard in this very consequential race here tonight. It's unclear. It is a cliffhanger. Talking to people, it doesn't seem as though many people have changed their minds as to who they voted for. Same people they voted before all those months ago. Many of them have been telling me that they want to vote for the same person, that not much has changed in their mind, but we'll have to see how that actually plays out when those votes are counted. It could take some time, though, because there are 48 names on the ballot. And so this is going to be a long night. There is a protest, of course, for people saying that they want to make this an election. They're against for electoral reform. And so certainly a lot of those names. So there's an adapted ballot. People have to actually write the name of the candidates there. So it could take some time, but people are going to be glued to the results tonight, Omar.
Yeah, very much so. I'll pick this one up from Omar. Thanks, Geneviève Beauchemin, for us in Terrebonne. It is a long ballot, a lot of names on that ballot, and likely a late night over there in Terrebonne. Let's get some more perspective on what those three ridings, where those by-elections are being held, look like at the federal election and what they look like right now. Heather Butts and Nick Nanos are our dynamic duo to help us do exactly that.
Thank you so much, Basha. Yes, we're taking a look at now and then, Nick, and I think we'll start with Quebec, as we just left off there with Geneviève. We'll take a look at the riding of Terrebonne. Nick, an interesting riding here because we have a lot of repeats. We'll take a look at our riding list here. Voters, as we saw, still casting their ballots, so we don't have any polls reporting just yet, but it really looks like a very similar lineup here, Nick.
Absolutely. Actually, this is going to be interesting because we will be able to directly compare, Heather, what happened in the last election with what happens tonight, because it's the exact same lineup in terms of who's up against each other when it comes to the Conservatives, when it comes to the Bloc and the Liberals.
And this is what it looked like when we left off about a year ago, and we know it was just a one-vote split here.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that I'm going to be watching out for are the Conservatives. You know, at 10,900 votes, that's around 18% of the vote. The big question is We know that the Liberals are highly motivated. We know that the Bloc are highly motivated. What will happen to Conservative support? Will it stay home? Could it potentially vote for the Bloc? Could Pierre Poilievre's party be a spoiler for the Liberals tonight? We don't know that.
Okay, certainly riding. We're going to keep a very close eye on tonight and see who really gets the vote out, who is on the ground working to get people to the ballot box. We're taking a look into Ontario now, one of the Toronto ridings, Scarborough Southwest. Some new faces here now, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what an interesting, an all-women lineup. So it's going to be a really interesting race tonight between the Liberals and the Conservatives and the New Democrats. And it'll be interesting to see how the NDP do now that they have a new leader.
Absolutely. And that is because the riding of Scarborough Southwest was, of course, the riding of Bill Blair, a former cabinet minister, resigning from the post, but very well liked and a Liberal stronghold here. Yeah, and this is not just a Liberal stronghold. Toronto and the GTA generally are quite good for the Liberals. It would be a big surprise if the Liberals didn't do well tonight, especially in Scarborough Southwest. Okay, now not far from that riding is the riding of University-Rosedale. And of course, again, we have new faces here because of Chrystia Freeland resigned. Yeah, exactly. So no incumbency in effect. There's party incumbency for sure for the Liberals, but no incumbent to kind of challenge on this front. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially since this is a top priority riding for the Liberals. We'll take a look at where we left off here. Chrystia Freeland took the lead by 25,000 votes. So she was well liked in this riding, a very secure post for them. It could change tonight. You never know, Nick. You never know. Well, it might change, but the fact of the matter is, Chrystia Freeland's brand within the Liberal movement, within the Liberal government was quite strong. Can the Liberals maintain that type of advantage? It might be difficult. Winning, not as difficult, but the thing is that she really racked up big wins. Okay, time will tell. We'll keep a very close eye on these ridings and a few others that are coming into play these days. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Heather and Nick. Let's get some more perspective from our strategy session that we have compiled. Kathleen, I'll start with you. Look, by-elections we often don't cover with this much fanfare. I think it's helpful to explain this is not just 3 by-elections. Tonight could cinch a majority government. We asked the Library of Parliament today, our team did, has that ever happened before? Have by-elections ever turned a minority government into a majority? They said no. Never. It hasn't. This could be a truly historical night.
Yeah, for sure. And it clinches Carney his majority, something he's always wanted. He didn't get a year ago, and he's going to likely, in all likelihood, get tonight. But what does that mean? He means he's basically moved from deal-making, backroom deal-making, luring over these 5 floor crossers to some kind of democratic legitimacy, because that's what will happen tonight. But the litmus test, I think, for me is whether he pulls out Terrebonne. Sure, we know that the 2 Toronto ridings are a lock, but can he actually pull that riding? Remember, the Liberals can spend their full budget in Terrebonne, right? They can actually pull money from their safe ridings in Toronto, and they can actually plow that into Quebec. They created a very short timeline for winning these by-elections. It was quickly called, and they set the date. So the expectations are high, and I'm sure we'll hear them downplaying it tonight. But that will be the real litmus test of how strong the Carney majority is.
I think it's fair to say, Shakira, that the Liberals that the Carney government wants these by-elections to result in their majority, not the floor crossings that we've seen, but there still could be more floor crossings. And there is criticism from the opposition that, they're labeling it as dirty backroom deals, like this idea that this isn't what people voted for a year ago. How do you think that's going to play out?
Exactly. Yeah, I think obviously the narrative they want to have is that the votes push them over the edge, not the floor crossers. And I think that makes sense for the narrative they want to push forward. But I think no matter how this plays out, 1, we know there's going to be a majority. But 2, if they get Terrebonne, like Kathleen said, it shows momentum. And I think that's what they want to have coming out of this, that they have momentum, that a stronghold for the Bloc for how long they're able to flip and maintain that moving forward. I think for Carney and the Liberals, that signals that they have wind in their sails, and we'll see what they do with that majority in terms of legislation, priorities, advancing priority policies, and how that all plays out in the months and even years ahead, obviously, with the majority.
Can you do a lot more, Scott, with a majority of 172 or 173 than you can with a minority of 171?
Yes. You want to be able to control the committees. At the end of the day, that's really what you want. So once you can control committees, you can control the passage of legislation through the House of Commons. You can bring in time limitations on debate. You can execute against your agenda. Now, that also means you're obligated to execute your agenda. No excuses necessary anymore, right? But they want to have a clean sweep tonight. When you talk to Liberals, they warn you, whether it's expectations management or whether it's genuine anxiety, They warn you that Terrebonne is going to be a toss-up, that they don't quite know. Remember, one of the implications of this longest ballot initiative is that you must write in the name of the candidate.
Yes.
You have to actually, so it requires a little bit more of an effort on the part of regular voters, and that can complicate things. And we'll have to see, does it take a long time for those results to come in? So that's obviously going to be the thing to watch.
Yeah, I think it is safe, Omar, to assume that it will take a while when they have to verify and witness each of those individually written ballots.
Certainly something that'll take time. And of course, for the Liberals, I mean, provincially, we've noticed that they've seen a bit of a bump, seen a bit of a surge, so hoping to take advantage of that. But again, if you look back at, what was it, a year ago, it was one vote that was the decider between the Bloc and the Liberals. Of course, that result nullified by the Supreme Court of Canada in February. So that is going to be the tightest of the three by-elections that we are sitting and looking at tonight. Let's head over to Sandy Rinaldo and the political panel. Sandy, and three individuals who certainly know and understand the mechanics and the machine of government intimately.
Oh, for sure. Decades of political experience between them, among them. But we're going to be nonpartisan today, very objective in our response to my questions. Yes?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. Marco Mendicino, as chief of staff with Mark Carney, you were there the night that he won the election in 2025. It was a minority government, so one can imagine that there was a little bit of disappointment, but he came from the ashes of the previous government where there was the anticipation that the Conservatives would win. So that night, did the two of you talk and say, let's go out and get that majority?
Well, I think, to begin, it is a stunning turnaround from where the Liberal Party was a year ago, really on the precipice, the edge of the abyss. And I think a big, if not the majority of the reason for that turnaround is because of Mark Carney's leadership. His qualities as an individual, obviously his credentials as an economist, his candor in his approach, all of that, I think, has contributed to both the turnaround that we saw, so coming within a hair width of a majority. But since then, the floor crossers from both sides of the political continuum.
And the charm offensive that went into that, right?
Well, that, and
even though the Prime Minister has said he's the last one to know when these things happen.
Well, I would say two things. One, the charm offensive comes in a variety of forms. One is the way he's carried himself on the world stage. And the Davos speech, I think, was a real turning point. But the way he has handled President Trump with seriousness and composure and not being rattled by the noise, I mean, those are all qualities that resonate with Canadians. And the last thing I would just say as an overarching observation is that what Canadians want right now is less partisanship. They want what you've asked us to be, which is to be cooperative and civil, to drive results in a very, very difficult moment right now, in the rupture moment, as Prime Minister has described it.
James Moore, you spent a lot of time with the Conservatives. You have a lot of experience as a politician. Are you upset by what happened with all those four members of the Conservative Party who've gone over to the Liberals, turned their backs on the Conservatives? And what does it say about Pierre Poilievre and his leadership?
Big questions with lots of parts there. I suppose I'm not surprised in some ways. I think Marco is right that we're living in a unique time in the sweep of Canadian history, in the sense of the threats against Canada. And it's not just the Canada-US-Mexico agreement on free trade, but it's also the belligerence of President Trump and the anger that has been emoted out of Canadians, rightfully so, by the sort of the dismissal of Canadians' sacrifice in Afghanistan, the threats to NATO, all of it taken together, that this is a unique moment where Canadians do have a sense of an aspiration for solidarity. Mark Carney is an individual because of his resume and what he's done previously in public life, but in a different way. And then in the year now that he's been Prime Minister, I think he's presented himself substantively and in his daily presentation in a way that has provided a lot of comfort to a lot of Canadians who ordinarily wouldn't have voted Liberal. There was a version of this, by the way, in the past where a lot of people voted for Jean Chrétien coming after the 1995 referendum, going into 97 and even in 2000, because they saw in him a person who knew a lot of Canada's history as a person who'd be a uniter. In 2008 and 2011, coming out of the worst recession since the Second World War, people found a lot of comfort in Stephen Harper because of who he was, his background as an economist, to get us through the Great Recession. And Mark Carney, because of his presentation, he's clearly not Justin Trudeau. He's clearly not Pierre Poilievre. He's clearly not Donald Trump. And so he has a unique offering to the political marketplace that has found a lot of attraction. So we conceivably, by the end of tonight, will have former deputy leader of the NDP sitting next to a former center-right member of the federal Conservative caucus sharing a desk in Parliament as new Mark Carney Liberals. That's a pretty impressive accomplishment that I think we have to recognize.
I see a conciliatory attitude happening here. It's what the Prime Minister has wanted all along, is a sense of unity among all three parties.
Well, we're on every week, so it certainly helps.
Okay, Nathan Cullen, NDP. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I'm not on every week with these guys, so I'm not going to be conciliatory. This is a interesting moment. I actually agree with just what everything my colleagues said, former colleagues.
Oh, no. I thought I was going to get some push and pull here. Yeah.
I think Mr. Carney, if he is able to achieve a majority, I think there's more coming. Just my sense in talking to some of my Conservative friends, James would know better in terms of floor crossing. Yeah. I got to say, as we do all these machinations and the number count and everything else, I've never been a huge fan of floor crossing. I think it speaks to a hubris and egotism from the politicians involved. That very little of why we got elected to the House of Commons, despite our obvious intelligence and good looks, had to do with us. It was the party, it was the leader, it was the platform, it was the moment at the time. Less than 5–6% of why Canadians send us is because of the individual in most ridings. I think it'd be great if MPs really appreciated and respected that, and I think there's ways that they could do it. I know it's a separate issue from tonight, but Mr. Carney will have achieved his majority if he does, in part because people picked up their bag and went across the floor without asking the voters who sent them to Ottawa first. And there's something that just breeds cynicism in that for me, and I wish it weren't the case. I wish we just, okay, I want to switch parties, I don't like the leader anymore. No problem.
Well, you agree with Pierre Poilievre.
Well, it'll be entirely.
Now he thinks that. But
let's be honest with the arithmetic, right? It'll be entirely because of the floor crossers. The three ridings that are at play tonight are three ridings that the Liberals won on election night that held them to a minority government.
Not yet, but...
Correct. But should they hold all three ridings tonight, those are ridings that they held when they won a minority government. So the majority is a consequence of the floor crossing. But that doesn't mean the floor crossings aren't consequential in the terms of the judgment of those individuals. And by the way, the public's reaction, since those floor crossings have happened, the public has not recoiled in anger and said Mark Carney needs to be punished.
That's true.
Quite the opposite.
I've been told to wrap, but I have to give the Liberal the last word here.
Well, I would just say one counter-argument to the skepticism, and we should be skeptical in all things political, and I say this as a in my post-political chapter, is that the individuals who have come over against a tidal wave of, I think, intimidation and harassment, and you feel it on the front lines when you listen to them and their families and their volunteers and their staff. So if you're looking for a personal payoff in the short term, I think the only personal payoff is that you're giving a greater voice to your constituency by being part of the caucus that is governing right now. And I think that also went into the decision to move to the Liberal Party for some of those individuals.
Okay, we'll get back to that, but right now I have to hand things off to Graham.
All right, Sandy and Graham, since Sandy mentioned it, let's ask you that. I mean, even if you assume that Mark Carney gets his majority today, two of those three ridings have traditionally gone Liberal. The hard work begins, right? I mean, when you look at polling across the country, Mark Carney is enjoying a considerable level of popularity, but is it your sense that that's because Canadians are risk averse right now because of all the geopolitical factors we're having, or is it because Canadians feel as though he's delivered?
I think it's three things, and I respect all of the numbers people that we're working with tonight and all of the ins and outs. I mean, this is about story, right? I think it's about three things. I think it's about Donald Trump, I think it's about Mark Carney, and I think it's about Pierre Poilievre. And I think that if Jean Chrétien, in his early days as an opposition leader, had challenges to his leadership, he wasn't up to the job, he didn't look like a prime minister, and that lived until he won the majority government. So other opposition leaders have been challenged about their leadership before. I don't know of someone who has lost this many MPs in this short of a time. Why is that? Is it because of Mr. Carney, Mr. Trump, or Mr. Poilievre? I say it's because of all three. And I think there's got to be a reckoning coming. Yes, Mr. Poilievre has tremendous support inside his party, the party apparatus, but that's not enough. He needs his caucus. You can't become the government in waiting. You can't be the opposition leader when you can't hold your caucus. That's a problem. And I know he's changed his tune. He's had a good couple of weeks. We've reported on it. Millions of people voted for him. But if more keep going, that's a problem. So I'm watching for a couple of things tonight, as we all are. Terrebonne, that 18% Conservative vote, where does it go? The fact, I think I just heard, we have similar advance that we did in the general for Terrebonne. That's big, right? So what does that mean? It's not going to be a typically low turnout. And then overall, whether it's the crossings or the by-elections or whatever, why is it that it's palatable to so many MPs and to Canadians to come to Mr. Carney, to a party that was on its deathbed? Talked to one MP, early polls inside the party when it was at the worst of the worst, the end of Trudeau. They were down to 15 seats, and he was one of them. That's how bad it was. And the public polls were similar, but really bad. So what has caused this turnaround, and when's the party going to end? It didn't end in Montreal this weekend. There were people in this room who were not in the bars. There were thousands of Liberals who were, and it was like a celebration. They were trying to hold it in, but they were euphoric about where they find themselves, even though the challenges are very, very difficult.
And you raise an excellent matter here, which is that, you know, in each of these three ridings, the Conservatives are not, they're not competitive. These are not competitive races for the Conservatives. And yet, when you look at what's happening tonight, the impact of what is happening tonight, this is certainly a story that will impact Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and that is why he is a part of this conversation to a huge degree.
Quickly, not competitive, but 18 in Quebec, for 18% for the Conservatives. That's a significant number. Where does that go in Terrebonne? Where does that go tonight?
Good question. You're watching a CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026.
It's time now for a short break, but when we come back, we've obviously got a whole lot more to talk about as we count down to those polls closing and some early results. We're back in a moment.
Yeah, as I was just typing in chat, that's totally wrong. There's been more floor crossings in the past. This isn't like a historical number of floor crossings. Also, while we're waiting here, we've got the website for Elections Canada up. As you can see, no results have come in yet. It says about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we'll start getting some preliminary results, and we'll be looking real close to see what happens here. Can find a better channel than CTV. To be honest, nothing else is really covering this. Like, unless we want to watch CBC, but I think CBC is probably worse. Like Global News isn't running a coverage of this. It's really just CTV. So let's see the CBC coverage. Oh, really? I don't even think they're covering it. Yeah, they're not even covering it. They're just talking about random news headlines. They have no coverage of the election, which is strange. But yep, we're just still waiting. Not much longer now until we can start seeing some early voting results, and we'll see what happens here. I was saying on this earlier, in our stream earlier, that Scarborough Southwest is definitely going to go Liberal. It's a Liberal stronghold, has been ever since it was formed, because it was consolidated from another, or it was taken apart from another riding. I think it used to just be Scarborough itself, and then they branched out places of Scarborough.
Federal By-Elections 2026. We are just over an hour away from polls closing in three ridings. You can see shortly, actually, there we go, that the countdown clock will be on the bottom right of your screen. We have our reporters fanned out in all three of the ridings that are up for grabs tonight. Let's take a look at this riding. University-Rosedale, again, that number is 0 at the top of your screen because the polls haven't yet closed. Here's who's in the race in Scarborough Southwest. Ali Begum, of course, the former former deputy leader of the NDP provincially, now running for the Liberals there. And the riding that we've been talking a lot about tonight, which is the riding of Terrebonne, which the Liberals won by a single seat last year. That, of course, is back in the game tonight.
And here is a reminder of where things stand and what's at stake. The Liberals currently sit at 171 seats, which means they're just a seat away from that magic number of 172, which allows them to form a technical majority. They need more than that, though, however, without the Speaker to break a tie.
Let's head over right now to the Toronto riding of University-Rosedale, where we find CTV's Heather Wright. Heather.
Well, it's a little quiet here now, Omar. We saw a bit of a wave here at this polling station at the University of Toronto campus with people coming after the work hour ended. And we had a chance to talk to some of the voters here. You know, no one's telling us outright who they are voting for, but you can get a sense of the issues that are important to the voters in this riding and the voters we spoke to. Things like cost of living, the United States' relationship with Canada, Canada's position on the world stage. And really talking to some of the people here, you do get a sense that not only did they want to come out to exercise their right, their democratic right, but they also wanted to be here to vote for the next person who, of course, they want to be representing this riding in Ottawa. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. Let's head over to Adrian Gabriel in the riding of Scarborough Southwest. And this was, of course, a riding, Adrian, that belonged to Bill Blair, who is currently now the ambassador to, or the High Commissioner, I should say, to the United Kingdom.
Yeah, that's right, Omar. He held it for more than 10 years. This has been a Liberal stronghold with Bill Blair as the MP here for more than 10 years before he accepted his position in the United Kingdom. Now, Dolly Begum, who is the Liberal hopeful tonight, she is also a household name here in this riding. Interestingly, because she was the deputy leader of the provincial NDP as an MPP here in Ontario for Scarborough Southwest. Now, speaking with individuals who've been heading in here tonight, interestingly, some different perspectives. One gentleman saying he's here to support the Carney Liberal government. Another telling me that she's not a big fan of politicians flip-flopping. Of course, Begman flipped from the NDP to now the federal Liberals. Another telling me that she normally votes Conservative. Though she likes Mark Carney, she thinks that he means business. We're going to have to wait and see how the vote turns out.
Okay, Adrian, CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is in the riding of Terrebonne. And Geneviève, what are voters telling you there?
Well, you know, there's really been a steady flow of voters who have been coming here. I can't say there are lineups, but certainly a lot of people coming and going. And they're talking about the fact that they really feel they want a clear winner tonight. This has long been a Bloc Québécois riding. Nearly 90% of the population here is Francophone. A lot of people have supported the party in the past, but many of them talking about the fact that at this particular time, as voters in other ridings have been saying, they want stability. They're talking about issues like their wallet, the cost of living, and the cost of housing. And so they're saying that they may change their vote, but they're looking to see, and especially what will happen tonight.
All right, Geneviève, thanks so much. Our Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin in Terrebonne. As we've been speaking about this evening, a big part of the story is, of course, floor crossings. If the Liberals form a majority tonight, it'll be the first time in modern Canadian history that the combination of by-elections and floor crossings got a government there. But floor crossings have definitely happened before. Here's a look at some of the big ones. Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, had 9 opposition members join his government, including 7 on the same day back in 1869. TV would have been wild that night. In more modern times, Jean Chrétien's Liberals attracted 6 over a decade, including 4 MPs from different parties in less than a month back in 2000. Belinda Stronach left the Conservatives to join Paul Martin's Liberals in 2005 while ending her relationship with fellow Conservative MP Peter MacKay. Stephen Harper attracted Liberal MP David Emerson to the Conservatives and his cabinet shortly after the 2006 election.
And actually fast forward to now when 5 MPs crossed the floor in as many months, including Conservative Chris D'Entremont, Conservative Michael Mock, Conservative Matt Genereux, Laurie Idlout, the lone NDP, and Conservative Marilyn Gladu. And that, I think for many people, was the most shocking of them all, right? This is a man now, Mark Carney, who has expanded the tent, but that tent wields MPs, fresh MPs like Marilyn Gladu, and if Dolly Begum wins tonight, will also possibly include somebody who was part of the NDP. So that poses its own challenges, potentially.
I think it's one of a number of challenges, and I'll swing over to our strategists here, that the government will face should they be able to secure a majority tonight, Kathleen. I understand, like, everyone's talking about their great poll numbers and stuff like that tonight, but they've been in power for a year. They've promised huge things. The Prime Minister has made no bones about promising a lot to Canadians and the scale of ambition that we haven't seen in generations. What kind of pressure will they face if they are no longer able to say, hey, the opposition is holding us back?
Right. I really think that if they form a majority tonight, tomorrow the clock starts on this government. It starts on this majority and what Prime Minister Carney can actually achieve in the time that he's got. On top of that, he's going to be facing another problem. Right now, his current problem in a minority, of course, is counting votes. He's got to count heads, make sure those seats, those bums are in those seats for those critical votes that happen in Parliament. But if he gets a majority and his votes are secured, then it pivots, and his challenge then becomes actually managing caucus, a very diverse caucus, as we've talked about tonight. My colleagues have talked about from the Dolly Begum to Marilyn Gladu. And I think that that will be a challenge to actually manage those ideological differences.
Yeah, it feels like when you're up against Trump, the ability to do that is perhaps mitigated by the fact that you can focus so much on the economy and, growing the economy to counter the threat that we face from Donald Trump. But if you look at a host of other issues, I think of a number of things on foreign policy or the environment, you're going to see massive disagreements between those two sort of sides of the spectrum within the same quote-unquote tent. How much of a challenge do you think that could pose moving forward, Shakir?
I think the challenge for Mark Carney is on the day-to-day issues. He's promising a lot of big things. For example, housing, major projects. These things don't really connect to individuals right away. And so I think for Mark Carney, as he moves forward, he's going to get his majority. But as he moves forward, what are those smaller things you're going to put in the window a month from now, 6 months from now, that the average Canadian is going to say, you know what, my life's a little better, life is a little more affordable? Because major projects, there's no through line between a pipeline or a port and how somebody feels about affordability. There's no, the housing projects, they're not going to get built until probably, those numbers are not going to be met until the end of his mandate. So how does he make people feel like their life is getting better in that interim period before those bigger issues actually come to fruition?
Well, he's got a good test case right now, Scott, with the price of gas. As everyone watching this program tonight will know, it's skyrocketed. There's a lot of debate in the House of Commons over what the government can do. My bet is something happens in short order. Wouldn't surprise me. What do you think they have to do the day after if they are able to secure a majority?
Well, we've actually already seen an advisory from the Prime Minister's office indicating he's going to make an announcement on affordability tomorrow. I don't think that's an accident. That is really the Prime Minister saying, I know I'm going to get my majority tonight. Don't know if I'll get 2 or 3, but I'm going to get my majority, and therefore I've got to start to put it to work right away on these frontline issues. I just want to add this, though. We're all talking about this as though it's politics as usual. And it's not politics as usual, right? Like if we went outside, there's 2 moons in the sky. This is unusual, what's happening here. All of these people crossing the floor, right? Why is this happening, and why is it meeting with approval from Canadians? Because we're at war. Because he is a wartime leader of a wartime government, because Donald Trump has effectively declared war on Canada, and even the war in Iran, led by Donald Trump, is the reason that those gas prices are skyrocketing. It is the trust that Canadians have in Mark Carney to manage through that war that's creating this political dynamic where things we have not seen before are happening. And that's why these questions about managing the caucus members and how are Dolly Begum and Marilyn Gladu ever going to come together on a point of view about the environment? Who the hell cares? Like, that's not a problem for Mark Carney.
But you're setting
problem for Mark Carney is
right,
Trump.
Not today.
Yeah.
Not
today. Exactly. Honeymoons do have an end, and you're actually setting up the problem for Mr. Carney in the future. Because as soon as the opposition and Donald Trump moves off stage, then he actually has to deal for once. Well,
when's that happening?
It's
not about when does the honeymoon end. When does the war end?
Yeah, but the affordability crisis is what people feel in their back pockets every day. Whether it's that beep at the grocery store when you're scanning your food in, or when it's that click at the pump when you're filling your gas tank. That is what they feel every day. Until Mr. Carney starts dealing with those affordability issues on the front line, then that is the problem.
He's listening, guys, I got to cut you off because there's others. He's listening so closely, he's going to have an announcement about it tomorrow, Kathleen. Right. So don't worry about it. Yeah.
And I do want to know from the panelists, I mean, just to your point, Vashi, about the price of gas, that the government did signal that they were looking at ways to alleviate the pressure for Canadians. But, some were criticizing that announcement as being a little bit too nebulous. I mean, what were the specifics of that announcement? So we'll talk about that.
The Conservatives are asking for them to remove the federal portion of the gas tax. They've been doing that for a few weeks.
Which Liberals have, I think, said already on your show that they would not be willing to do that. So we'll talk about that when we come back. You're watching a CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026.
A very short break. We're back in a moment.
Okay, just checking. Still no counts on anything yet. So we've got just a little under an hour until we start getting actual counts in, and we'll be starting to see this page fill up, which is exactly what they're watching. This is just the Elections Canada website, so we will see here in a minute. We don't have long. While we wait, we can watch this. If you guys didn't see this earlier, I posted this just a little around an hour ago.
Confident in the Conservatives' ability, or since there is the opportunity for the government to get a majority government for just one of these by-elections, what's your feeling on how they may be achieving their majority here?
We fielded 3 Conservative candidates in the 3 by-elections. And these are Conservatives who stood and shared our vision for a more affordable Canada, a Canada with safer streets, and a Canada that can stand on its own 2 feet and work collaboratively with our allies and really demonstrate our sovereignty and support our allies around the world. The government has the opportunity, as do all parties, with their candidates to win in each of those 3 by-elections. But we'll keep in mind how 2 of them came to pass. It was through Liberals who ran in the last election and made a commitment to Canadians to serve and stepped down, triggering that process. The government seems committed to their strategy of backroom deals to achieve a majority in spite of the outcomes of this evening's by-elections. And what I would say to that is that for anyone who stands on a Canadian's doorstep and makes a commitment, and in the case of a Conservative who would say that they're going to fight for affordability, they're going to fight for safer streets, they're going to fight for Canada in the way that Conservatives have promised to do that, and then to reverse themselves fully on everything that they said, I think that they should face the voters at an earlier occasion should their voters think that that's necessary. And Mr. Poilievre has said that he believes that recall legislation is a tool that Canadians should have. It's important to support our democracy, to restore Canadians' confidence, and that's a view that I share very much.
Billy Morin said today that the Liberal Party has approached him about crossing the floor, but he has no intention to do so. Are you expecting more from your party to cross the floor to the Liberals? I think that Billy Morin's a great Conservative, and I'm in a caucus with 140. There's 140 Conservatives in our caucus, and we just I think less than 2 months ago, had a vote with delegates from every corner of this country, giving over 87% support to the Leader of Canada's Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, and I expect that Mr. Poilievre will continue to enjoy the confidence of Conservatives. But do you expect that there will be more floor crossers from your party in the coming weeks, months? I expect that anyone who stands on the doorstep of Canadians and makes a commitment to make life more affordable, that they'll deliver on that. If you take a look at the record of this Prime Minister and his government, I mean, anyone who's been to a grocery store can see prices are the pressure of high grocery prices is not easing. In fact, it's getting worse. And at the pumps, when Conservatives have given suggestions, offered our hand to the government to lend a strategy like cutting taxes at the pumps. The government has yet to take us up on that. I would expect that everyone who ran to make life more affordable would continue in that fight for Canadians, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Thanks for the question. Have a great day.
Okay, we'll switch back to the mainstream media.
This is the research that you're looking at, and what I love most is when you break it down to specific timelines and, again, specific stories that are unfolding around the world, Nick.
Yeah, you know, from the get-go, it's clear that Mark Carney has had the advantage over Pierre Poilievre on the leadership front when we ask Canadians who they prefer as Prime Minister, but there are some key junctures of public opinion that we saw that had an impact on that margin. You know, at the very top of the list has to be President Donald Trump. And you know, the thing is that when Trump is in the news, when Mark Carney is engaging with Donald Trump, it's usually good news for Mark Carney and also good news for the Liberals.
Certainly gave him a boost last fall. And then, of course, November 4th, that is where this really got rolling, our first floor crosser.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is that when we look at floor crossers such as D'Entremont, we can see that it adds to the narrative of Mark Carney and his personal appeal, his appeal outside of other voters. And you know, as context, we saw that the Conservatives were in the 30s in support. Pierre Poilievre, on the preferred Prime Minister front, was much lower. That means that there's a significant proportion of committed Conservative supporters who think that someone other than Pierre Poilievre is the best person to be Prime Minister.
Okay, and we'll watch as that support went up and then came back down slightly. But again, another floor crosser with Michael Ma.
Yeah, it's almost like for Pierre Poilievre, can the guy grab a break? Like, he's got to deal with Trump. He's got to deal with one defection, then he has a second defection. And then, you know, what we see as the trend continues, that speech by Donald Trump at Davos did increase his popularity, especially in the province of Quebec.
Mark Carney, of course, yeah. Mark Carney speaking at Davos.
Yes.
With Trump, you know, there was everybody who was speaking there, but it was Mark Carney and his own popularity here who skyrocketed there. And then we got into the winter months. We had Poilievre's leadership. We saw a bit of a change there as well.
Yeah, actually, you'd think that Pierre Poilievre would have done a little better coming out of his leadership review where he scored extremely high. But what you can see is that there was really no bump coming out of the Conservatives or for Pierre Poilievre on that front.
Okay, and then we have another floor crosser, of course, Matt Genereux, coming in February. And then as we continue on throughout the winter, things get even worse. We've got the war in Iran now and the state of the economy changing big time.
So, you know, think of Mark Carney. You know, he's got Donald Trump that helps him. He's got defections to his cause that help him. And then he has the ability to be a statesperson, you know, statesman, focusing on the Middle East, focusing on trade, roll all those things up. Advantage Carney today, at least.
Okay, and then, of course, we have one more floor crosser. That was happening in March, and then we rolled on through to our final floor crosser, which really brings us to today, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the thing is you can see the massive advantage, 52-25 for Mark Carney over Pierre Poilievre. You know, Pierre Poilievre has to get a break. You know, usually what happens is politicians need their opponents to make a mistake. Hasn't happened yet. Not saying it can't happen, but not yet.
Okay, Nick, thank you. Back to you.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. Let's head over to Sandy Rinaldo and the political panel. And certainly a big question, Sandy, as we've been talking about for the past little while, is Pierre Poilievre's political future. Because, you know, as Nick pointed out, Pierre Poilievre needs a break. But to have 4 of the 5 defectors coming from the Conservative Party, not a good look if you're a leader of the Conservative Party.
And Omar, to pick up on that, and I want to put my first question to James Moore, who the audience should know was a heavy-duty minister in the Stephen Harper government. So, you know, I'm assuming you still have a lot of contacts within. 9, we're hearing talk about 9 potential floor crossers to come. What can you tell us about that?
Look, that's gossip and chatter. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a big cultural shift. Scott mentioned it earlier, and I think it bears repeating, right, is that as of tonight, it's a simple crash moment. Like, this is a historic moment that a government will go from minority to majority as a consequence of these by-elections and the floor crossers combined. A light switch is about to get flipped, and the expectations of the government are about to blow up in terms of considering where they get their opposition from. There's no premier who's fighting with this prime minister. There's no big city mayor that's fighting with this prime minister. The bureaucracy is aligned. He's made massive sweeps of changes changes to the deputy minister portfolio across the government of Canada. He's made appointments to key crown corporations. The Senate is probably 80% progressive center-left who are aligned with Mark Carney's worldview. He really has no opposition, so the expectations game is really high. Now, if you tip over from a minority to majority, which is likely about to happen in about an hour's time, when that happens, I think, you kind of wonder what other people who are sitting in opposition, who may be in their third, fourth, or fifth term as a member of Parliament, they see no horizon where they actually could form government, and they actually everybody wants to live a life of purpose. You want to do something meaningful with your life. You want to have an opportunity to contribute. And after 10 years of giving the same speeches and making the same protests against the same Liberal government, the idea of crossing the floor and actually maybe getting some infrastructure built in your riding and feeling part of something that's bigger than just normal red team, blue team politics, I think there's a temptation to do that. So another thing to keep in mind as well is that, we're talking about still a very unstable majority government. 172 seats is the most unstable of a majority government. In British Columbia, there are 93 seats in the provincial legislature, and Premier Eby reminded a group that I was a part of a couple weeks ago that amongst his one-seat majority government in British Columbia, he has 2 members of his caucus who are undergoing cancer therapy right now. So in a 343-seat federal parliament, there will be people who will have health challenges. There will be people who might have marital challenges. There may be people who have family issues. Maybe people who want to run for another level of office, or people who just get tired of the travel. So in a one-seat majority mandate, this is still a very unstable majority mandate. So therefore, if there's anybody who wants to cross the floor and to provide even greater cushion, I think there might be some leverage for them to do that. So I think we might still see some more drama. That panel that we just saw, the timeline of the last few months since the campaign, I think there may be more dramas on the horizon to come of people who want to cushion the majority and to keep this parliament going for quite some time.
All right, Nathan, I want to pick up on that because, Mark Carney's going to have to manage these floor crossers, right? Mm-hmm. And 2 of them, a couple of former NDPers, Dolly Begum, if she wins tonight, and certainly Laurie Idlad, who's crossed over. What advice would you give to him to manage them within his caucus?
Stay popular, because winning solves most everything. Becoming unpopular, or the appearance that you can't win, allows disgruntlement and personal ambitions, the straying of eyes to other orders of government and opportunities in the private sector. All of that becomes much more enticing. I am struggling a little bit. We're talking about this minority to majority move likely tonight. I'm trying to think of what Mr. Carney has proposed that he hasn't been able to get through Parliament, usually quite quickly, since he became Prime Minister. There's been a wild form of agreement between the 2 major parties, Liberals and Conservatives, on most things, and that's understandable because Mr. Carney borrowed most of his agenda from the Conservative platform. So I can understand why there's general agreement. Oh no, I'm talking about building big things and getting rid of the carbon tax. Like, the list is quite long. So I don't think there's going to be a seismic change in the ambition of the Liberals, because they've been able to accomplish most of what they've wanted. Parliament's not being frustrated like it was before when Marco was there, I think, or maybe not. I wonder about the challenge, not tonight, not tomorrow night, 6 months, 12 months from now, 18 months from now. I'm a backbench Liberal. I've got no chance of getting into cabinet. Those votes matter a lot when the majority is only a couple of votes.
Mark Carney's going to have to manage a big majority here, and within the majority are others who had very different points of view before this.
Sure, and I think one of the interesting characteristics of the crossovers is just how diverse each of the members are from the different communities they come from, demographically, geographically. And yes, there's no doubt that there are definitely some disagreements, and that's a healthy thing, by the way. It's not just in the Liberal Party where there'll be disagreements. There'll be disagreements in the Conservative Party. There'll be disagreements in the NDP and the Bloc, and that's a healthy thing. But what I would just say is a few things. Okay, so 1, it's how you reconcile those disagreements with the priorities that you advocate for in your community. And clearly the thread that runs through all of those floor crossers is that they believe that the Liberal Party is the best engine through which they can achieve those results. 2, no one doubts the provenance or the authorship of Prime Minister Mark Carney's ideas when it comes to his economic agenda. I was with him when we introduced the major projects legislation. I was with him when we advised that we should work, yes, across the aisle. I think it was a good thing that the Conservatives Conservatives and the Liberals united to pass that legislation, because it's going to be one of the ways in which we are going to get our energy to market, which is exactly what we need at a moment in time when the world is starved for energy. And so how do we do that? We do that by building relationships across the aisle. We do that by building relationships, as James said, with premiers, with local leadership, and with Indigenous leadership, and that's precisely what Mr. Carney's been doing.
Spoken as a good leader who was chief of staff for Mark Carney.
Did you get a bit of a hint of that?
You know, I have a sense. Okay, that's it for us right now. Take it back.
I think that Nathan raises a good point, though, about how, like, you know, if the focus is on execution, if they are to secure a majority government tonight, and the focus is on execution, it won't necessarily be like a whole different story in the House of Commons. There are some bills, but they are not the biggest bills. They're like around religion, for example, and hate laws that they have faced some clear opposition to. But the majority of their agenda in Parliament has advanced pretty easily. So perhaps, you know, the focus is not necessarily execution there, but are they able to actually, if they say they're going to support a pipeline, get the pipeline bill, things like that, versus how different the House dynamic becomes.
But to Shakir's point earlier, I mean, you know, Mark Carney also has to focus on short-term wins, right? A lot of the announcements so far are things that take several years, take several election cycles sometimes. And so, Graham, in the short term, you know, what can he convince Canadians to say, hey, you know, I hear you, I'm listening to you, where you're going through not the easiest time economically, but here's what I can deliver.
Well, maybe tomorrow, like Ashley was talking about, it might be an energy announcement. I think there's been a lot of talk about big things, and there needs to be tangibles on the ground that show that this matches the rhetoric of the time, right? Like we're talking about World War II era build. Okay, we've got to start showing it, you know. I mentioned to somebody a couple of days ago, on the defense front, when South Korea issues an RFP, they sign a contract in 40 days. Sometimes we're decades. Like it's that kind of tangible thing.
But we're still waiting for the F-35 review after a year.
Yeah, right. And so at what point does the rhetoric start to sound stale? And at what point do people say, okay, you've got to show me where the rubber hits the road? And I think that's the year going forward. They are preparing, I think others have said it, maybe Scott, they are preparing for that change in narrative and also in power from minority to majority, because they're going to have more time. They're going to have more open water. So what does that mean about all this rhetoric? He's got to explain that to Canadians. I expect he will. And start spending some of that political capital that he has, right? Not leaving it on the table. The best prime ministers spend it all and get it done. And he says now is the time to do that.
And we will get a better sense of what he's working with in you know, shortly after 32 minutes, if I can see. That's when polls close at 8:30 Eastern. You're watching a CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026.
We've got another short commercial break, but we're back in a moment as we count down to the outcome.
Holy crap. The commercial every freaking 5 minutes. Let's take a look. Still no numbers yet. Yeah, I imagine we don't have to wait much longer than half an hour, and we'll start seeing some numbers here, because it's not a lot to tally up. There was only 20% that showed up for the early voting, and typically by-elections in general don't have as much of a turnout as normal elections do. So we will see how quick they can tally it up and give us some numbers. I should do ads every 5 minutes. Oh, that's pretty funny. Go to CBC coverage. They're not covering this. Are they? They've scheduled it for starting in 2 minutes. CBC's going to start covering it. So we can switch between CBC and CTV, but I mean, I'd rather, if I'm going to pick any one of the worst mainstream medias, I'm probably going to pick to watch CTV instead of CBC. CBC is even worse. Yeah, exactly. But it looks like, yeah, they are starting to cover it. Their stream's starting up in about a minute here. CTV is the lesser of the evils. Exactly. Exactly.
Welcome back to the CTV News Special, Federal By-Elections 2026. I'm Omar Stachadina.
And I'm Vashi Capellos.
It is 8 p.m. Eastern, and in just 30 minutes, polls will close in 3 by-elections we are closely watching tonight. We are standing by for more results from those 3 ridings, Toronto's University-Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest. And, of course, where the political drama really lies tonight, Terrebonne in Quebec in the Montreal area.
And the reason that we are so interested in what happens in these 3 by-elections is because it could determine whether or not Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, and the Liberals are able to secure a majority. They right now sit at 171 seats in the House of Commons, just 1 seat shy of what it takes to form a majority government. If they are successful in any of these ridings, they will hit the 172 mark. And if they're successful and they sweep all 3, then they will, of course, hold a majority of 174 seats.
Let's check in with our correspondents in the field right now. Over to Heather Wright, who is in the riding of University-Rosedale. Heather, what are voters telling you tonight about what's important to them?
Well, we've heard from a number of voters, Omar, things like the economy, cost of living, and also international issues as well. The war in Iran, the war in Ukraine, in Gaza, and Canada's position on the world stage. Those are all a variety of things that we've been hearing from voters as they've been casting ballots. And look, while this is considered a Liberal stronghold, voters here will be represented tomorrow for the first time since this riding was created by an MP not named Chrystia Freeland. Of course, the former Deputy Prime Minister held this riding since it was created in 2015. And so some of the things I'm going to be looking for are, what is the margin of victory? Keep in mind, she won this riding 1 year ago by 64%. Omar.
That's a really good point, Heather. Thank you. Let's bring in Adrian Gobriel in the downtown Toronto riding of Scarborough Southwest. Adrian.
Yeah, Omar, we've been speaking with individuals who've been going into this polling station tonight, a steady stream. There hasn't been a lineup out here all day long, though this evening we've seen more and more people, Omar, begin to arrive. I've been asking some what's an important election issue during this by-election for them. I just spoke with one woman from India. She says international doctor. She says she's a trained doctor overseas. She graduated university overseas, and she says she cannot work here. She cannot find work here. I asked her what party she felt gives her the best chance at what she is hoping for her future, for her family's future. She said the Liberal Party. Another saying that she doesn't appreciate it when politicians flip-flop. Dolly Begum, the Liberal candidate here in this riding, flipped from the provincial NDP, where she was a deputy leader, and she flipped over to be a candidate for the Liberals. Of course, this has been a Liberal stronghold. Bill Blair holding this for more than a decade. In the last federal election, he won with 62% of the vote. The Conservatives coming in at just over 30% of the vote during the last election. And we know that the advanced voting numbers here were pretty strong on Easter Monday. Just over 10,000 people came out then. We're waiting this evening to see how it all tallies up.
All right, Adrian, thank you. And let's head over to Geneviève Beauchemin, the Quebec Bureau Chief, who is in the riding of Terrebonne. And Geneviève, you know, they say that every single vote counts, and nowhere perhaps is that more true than in the riding of Terrebonne. If you go back to last April, this was a riding where the Liberals won by a single vote. That result, of course, nullified in February by the Supreme Court, which is why we're having the by-election tonight. What are voters telling you about the drama that's unfolding in their riding and what they hope to achieve today?
Well, they're certainly taking that to heart. You can see people still going into the polling station, many of them quickening their steps. They want to make sure they get their vote in before the 8:30 deadline here in this riding. So they're certainly trying to get there, racing a little bit. I can see cars arriving here. There has been a steady trickle of people coming in all day saying that they have been told over and over again that this is a consequential election. There have been hundreds of volunteers that have been fanning across the riding here. MPs have arrived in this riding from all parties to convince voters to vote to get their votes in for this consequential election.
All right, thanks, Geneviève. Jean-Van Boschman in the riding of Terrebonne. One of the big issues for the bloc, actually, in Terrebonne has been the Alto high-speed rail network, the proposed Alto high-speed. It became a big issue in this by-election in particular, so that'll be interesting to see how sort of that unfolds tonight. More largely, the issue set throughout the last year has been one dominated by the economy, Donald Trump, of course, and now more so inflation. And the sort of sequence of those issues has changed. Let's bring in Heather Butts and Nick Nanos to take a deeper dive into that.
Vashi, you're exactly right. These issues matter so much to people, Nick. It really is what gets them out to those polling stations. But they've changed significantly if we look just in the last year, really. We'll take a look now at where things were, what really mattered most to people, according to your data and research, Nick, when we were at the polls last May for the federal election.
Oh, absolutely, Heather. You know, what you can see is at the end of the last election that it was really about jobs and the economy and Trump. Those really being the dominated top national issues of concern in the CTV Global Mail tracking, followed by healthcare, the environment, and debt and deficit. And you know, the interesting thing we have to remember when we were doing the nightly tracking with CTV News, Trump and jobs kind of traded places kind of throughout the week and throughout the campaign. But, you know, realistically, within the margin of error, those two things as the primary drivers of opinion in the close of the last federal election.
And I think for many people, those two certainly seem to go hand in hand. So there we were last year, May of 2025. If we flip it to this year, April of 2026, I want to point out here, Nick, inflation is number 2. It wasn't even on that list last year.
Yeah, it was actually quite low. And also check out what we're calling the Trump effect. It's dropped from being in first and second now to being in fourth place. Clearly pocketbook issues starting to dominate and dominating the mindset of Canadians between jobs, the economy, and inflation. And you know, on the inflation front, usually that is very bad news for incumbent governments. But I think in this particular case, it could be that Canadians are connecting the higher price of gas to Donald Trump, not necessarily the Carney administration. So the Liberals getting a little bit of a break on that front when Canadians are worried about meeting the bills, paying for groceries, paying for the rent, and also paying for gas.
These are pocketbook issues, Nick, that really matter to every single Canadian right across the board, no matter where you live, no matter where you're spending your money, and how you're really just trying to get by. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Heather and Nick. And we've got some news from Elections Canada. Those polls are closing at 8:30, so we're, you know, just 22, 23 minutes away. Some advanced polls and early results will come to us from Terrebonne after those polls close, but we are anticipating, according to Elections Canada, that the results in that riding will now likely come overnight. Again, not necessarily a surprise because the ballots you have to write in the full name, they have to individually be counted, so it's a bit of a different situation there. But now we've got some official confirmation from Elections Canada that we don't anticipate that the full results will be known until, you know, sometime overnight, something that will factor into, you know, the overall count at the end of the evening. But the Liberals can still secure the majority even without Terrebonne.
Because they just need that one seat.
That's right.
But of course, a tight race to begin with, then you have those long ballots. And
a true nail-biter.
A lot of counting, exactly.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, let's bring back our strategist. Actually, Scott, I wanted to pick up on the issues that Nick was talking about and how far Trump has fallen in that list from where he was in the minds of Canadians as they cast a ballot last year. It fluctuates for sure, but it does feel like we've gotten used to sort of this instability through Donald Trump, and he isn't taking as direct aim at us at the moment as he is elsewhere. How does that matter politically, do you think? Or does it?
Well, I'm not sure it does, because I would pick up on something else that Nick's, I mean, obviously it does, but to me the critical question is blame. When people are upset about the cost of living, when they're upset about the price of gas, when they're upset and anxious about jobs and their future, all those issues which we register as, that's not Trump, Trump's now fourth, are they in fact Trump? Are voters blaming Trump, and as a consequence, it is accruing in a weirdly way toward Mark Carney's political benefit, because people say, well, then now we have to think about who do we trust most to take on this. To me, the spotlight of that is gas prices. I think the reason it's on people's minds is that I had to fill up my gas tank this morning and it was wicked expensive. And people, I think, are blaming the war in Iran and they're blaming Trump. And that takes you back to leadership, which is benefiting Carney. So that dynamic will not last forever. But it seems like it's held for a year. In fact, if you want to look at what the likely results are tonight and the consequence of this past year, Carney is getting stronger as Trump gets weaker. What's happening to Trump domestically? His political position is weakening. This war in Iran has been a disaster for him in terms of popular support in the United States. His position internationally has eroded. People now tell him no to his face, something that didn't happen 8 months ago. So as he weakens, Carney seems to be strengthening in terms of popular appeal, attracting floor crossers, winning by-elections, and that's going to set up one fascinating dynamic for the summer when it comes to renewed trade talks.
How long does that last, though? Because we are entering a critical juncture, right? We're entering into CUSMA, USMCA negotiations, and I think most Canadians at a certain point will want some kind of resolution, some kind of deal.
I don't even know if that's true. I mean, it'd be interesting to ask Nick, but there have been polls that have suggested that Canadians are a little ambivalent about getting a deal right now. I think partially because they worry that any deal you get out of Trump right now, A, isn't reliable, and B, might stink.
It is interesting, though, that the Prime Minister has not suffered any negative consequences for the sort of Trump stuff, insofar as, Shakir, there were self-imposed deadlines set, right? You'll hear it from the opposition all the time. You were going to get a deal in the summer. We were going to get all of these things. We were going to get the tariffs removed. That didn't materialize. And I know the line from the government is certainly, like, compared to other countries, we do have an, quote unquote, okay deal. We have the best of the lot. But it is interesting to me that so far there have not yet been pronounced political consequences to that. What does that tell you about how they're going to navigate the rest of this with Trump?
I think Canadians are giving Mark Carney a pass on Trump just because of how unpredictable he is. I think folks realize that, you know what, dealing with him, anything can happen at any given time. So if you can't get a deal immediately, we'll give you a pass. Despite having your own deadline of July of last year, it doesn't really matter. Go on. What bothers me with those numbers as a conservative is that when you see jobs in the economy high, issues number 1 and 2, conservatives usually dominate. And to not see Pierre and conservative numbers kind of rising with those numbers, those issues at the top, it's concerning to me that what's happening there. Why are the conservatives not getting at least a little bump, a little win in their sales when the economy is the number 1 issue? And that to me should cause some concern for conservatives as we move forward and see how Pierre kind of manages his leadership in his caucus in the months ahead.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but maybe some concern for the NDP as well, Kathleen, that if jobs are such a, inflation and cost of living are so much a concern for Canadians, and that is not correlating with any additional support for New Democrats who talk about cost of living all the time, or conservatives who do the same, like, what does that say?
Yeah, I think the equation is different for conservatives than it is for New Democrats, and I'm not just saying that as a partisan. I'm saying that because I think actually, Pierre Poilievre is living on borrowed time, right? He lost an election he was supposed to win. He lost his own riding. And then even further, he's lost 4 MPs. And so now the question is how long can he remain? And possibly it's because a year ago at this time, Canadians fixed their opinion of Mr. Poilievre and decided not to give him the PM chair. For New Democrats, there's a new leader, Avi Lewis, just elected just a couple weeks ago on March 29th. We have very low expectations for ourselves because we only have 6 seats in the House. So for him, actually, it's only upside. And Mr. Carney has opened an entire left flank for himself by actually not dealing with the bread and butter issues at the kitchen table for Canadians. Those people who are not raking in great profits from oil and gas increases, or at the grocery stores, or you name it. So there's actually a window of opportunity for the new leader in Avi Lewis to actually make a name for himself and pick away at Carney's left flank that he's largely been ignoring because he's too busy kind of vacuuming up the middle and trying to kind of occupy that center ground to take in progressive conservatives and radical right-wing conservatives into the Liberal House.
The thing is that it's working right now, right? Like, to be fair, your point is right. Theoretically, it looks like there's this huge flank on the left that would be open, and you'd think, for example, Dolly Begum would go there, but instead she's going to the Liberals at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to do a quick time check right now, and it's 8:13 Eastern time. We are roughly 15 minutes away from polls closing, and we start getting those results.
We're going to take a quick commercial break before just that, and before the results start rolling in. We're back in a moment.
I will switch over to CBC's coverage. Let's see how awful this is.
In an area where nearly half the population identifies as immigrants, Scarborough Southwest's 4 main party candidates were all born abroad. Among them, Bangladeshi-born Liberal Dolly Begum, until recently the Ontario NDP's deputy leader. She stunned her former party, resigning from the legislature to campaign alongside her new leader, Mark Carney.
My principles, my values remain the same, which is to stand up for the people of this community.
At a candidates debate held in a Scarborough church, New Democrat Fatima Shaban criticized Liberal spending cuts.
Behind every cut, there are people that are going to be suffering.
Missing from the stage, Conservative Diana Filipova, who ran last year in a riding across town. This time, she faces the same challenge, a community long accustomed to voting Liberal.
A word on Dolly Begum, who, as we said, has recently moved from the provincial New Democrats to the federal Liberals now. She's not fully explained that move and why she wanted to go to Ottawa, other than to say that she feels that after representing this riding of Scarborough Southwest provincially for the past 7 or 8 years, she feels now that on issues such as housing and affordability, she could do more working with the governing Liberals after all those years in opposition here in Toronto. Rosie.
Okay, Thomas Degla there for us. Thank you so much for that. We will, of course, come back to you through the evening. Let's stay in Toronto, though, and take a look at the riding of University-Rosedale. University-Rosedale, a diverse downtown Toronto riding, was created by merging half of 2 other ridings ahead of the 2015 election. And since winning Toronto Centre in a by-election in 2013, Chrystia Freeland celebrated each election night in University-Rosedale with a huge victory in her home riding. Something else to note here, you can see a national trend playing out in these numbers as support for the NDP crumbled across the country last election. Here, the NDP lost more than 15 percentage points between elections. The Liberals seem to mostly have been the beneficiary. Okay, Dale Manukduk is in the riding of University-Rosedale tonight. Dale.
Yeah, Rosie, and very much like what Thomas said about Scarborough Southwest, voters here in University-Rosedale very much aware of the situation in Ottawa and that their voting here in the riding could tip the scales in the balance of power there. I'm standing here at an intersection at College and Spadina Street, and I can tell you, no joke, from where I'm standing, I can see parts of 4 different neighborhoods in University-Rosedale. There's so much diversity here, as you just mentioned, and one person is going to represent all of these voters. From Koreatown to quirky
All right, let's leave Rosemary alone.
At 172, they will need the speaker to break a tie in a confidence vote. 173 or 174 would make it a lot more comfortable governing. Let's head over to Sandy Ronaldo and the political panel. It's an interesting, the speaker's role in all of this, Sandy, of course, because according to parliamentary convention, and forgive me for nerding out here a little bit on politics, but the speaker...
It's a place to do it.
Exactly, but traditionally the speaker has...
Safe space, yeah.
Thank you. Traditionally, the Speaker has voted to keep the status quo unless it concerns, a non-confidence motion, for example. Then he would vote with the government. So an interesting. I don't know when we would use this in Trivial Pursuit or Political Trivia, but there you have it. If you need to tell your friends,
maybe tomorrow if they win 172.
Exactly, gives us something to talk about. But Sandy, over to you about this, the size of this majority and why it matters.
Okay, I'm going to call my friends, and the friend I'm going to call first is Nathan Cullen, who's going to come to the table with his perspective as someone who ran for the NDP leadership way back in 2012. Yeah. So what does 172 mean to you?
It's all context. To me, I said this a bit before, it's a difference without a lot of distinction in terms of what happens next in Parliament. There's nothing that Mark Carney couldn't have brought to Parliament last week that he can bring now and not have it pass through. So I think it's maybe about expectations management for the Prime Minister. Now you have a majority. Canadians who follow politics will know that that means certain things, but most of us don't nerd out on the regular and know that that now affects committees, and committees can pass legislation. I think there's going to be a bunch of what are called closure motions, just shutting down debate on certain bills. The Prime Minister can, if he chooses, wield a much heavier hand in the House of Commons, because a majority government in Canada is a very powerful thing. Unlike almost any other legislature or parliament around the world, it is a very, very powerful, distinctly powerful in Canada. And the expectations will be to address the things that Canadians are worried about. All those things we've talked about, cost of living, Mr. Trump, and the economy, which is as likely as anything headed towards a recession. It's got some big challenges ahead. We as a country have big challenges ahead, some in our control, some not. I think that's going to be the management of those expectations for Mr. Carney, because now he's got full control if he wins the majority tonight.
Okay, full control, but he still, if he just wins one seat, needs the Speaker to break the tie. So what's he going to do if he gets one seat or two? I mean, two, he's a little more comfortable.
No. Sure, and the greater the margin, the more durable the majority is. But I actually think that there are some concrete distinctions, and Nathan referred to some of them. Once you do have a majority, there's an ability to have a greater amount of discipline around committees, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be relationship building across the aisle. So who the chair of the committee is will influence the discourse and the debate at committees. I think on the flip side, there's going to be greater expectation on Mr. Carney and the government to then deliver because of the majority threshold, hopefully having been reached a little bit later on tonight. And so what does that mean in practical terms? Well, it means responding to some of the issues which have been identified throughout the course of the evening so far. If inflation continues to go up because of the situation in the Middle East, what will be the government's response? When he first came in, he cut taxes for the middle class. He cut the carbon tax. He introduced a grocery rebate. I mean, that puts cash into the hands of Canadians, into the houses of Canadians. But what's next? What do we do to relieve the pressure at the pump? I also think that there will be expectations to deliver on energy. So with the majority, will there be an ability to revisit some of the legislation or to advance other objectives to get shovels in the ground? What will we do with regards to the Defense Investment Agency? This is the new procurement agency, which is designed to herd all of the different ministries and start getting some of those contracts out so that we can reinvigorate the industrial sector when it comes to defense. What are we going to do with regards to housing? I mean, these are all of the things that are going to be foursquare on the agenda the morning after. And I think that's one of the reasons why we should look forward to what the Prime Minister will have to say sometime tomorrow morning.
Spoken like a true Liberal. Okay, James, I want to talk to you about the fact that you're from the West and Nathan is too. The West is going to have to live with the results, right? Without having a say. So what does it mean for the West with a majority government in Ottawa? Will this deepen a feeling of Western alienation at a time when we have that Alberta referendum in the West?
Well, I mean, look, I think one of the virtues that you could say about Mark Carney's mandate is that it actually is quite pan-Canadian, it's quite national. So I don't know that there's frankly much of an East-West divide yet, in part because Premier Danielle Smith and the MOU, they're on side, they're showing forward progress. And when you have forward progress with David Eby on certain files, forward progress with Danielle Smith and others, it's good. Progress isn't a final deliverable, so we'll get to there. But I did want to take you up on part of what you said to Marco about 172 and what does it mean going forward. I think probably for the next 6 months, it means that Mark Carney has a tremendous amount of velocity behind his mandate, right? Parliament sits for 8 more weeks. Those 8 weeks, I think, is an opportunity for him to circumscribe Parliament, maybe put in closure motions to decide what his legislative agenda will be that he wants to brag about in the summer months. It also gives him an opportunity to set the stages with the newly appointed ambassador in Washington, Mr. Weissman, Janice Charette, our chief negotiator for the CUSMA reconsideration this summer, to have clarity with them and a mission, and to maybe have some opportunity through Parliament to mitigate some of the things that Donald Trump may do with regard to trade. So it puts him in a strong position going into CUSMA. That's good. Going into the fall, though, when the next federal budget comes around, I think that's probably where we're going to see peak Mark Carney, in the sense that we will get through tonight, he'll get his majority, maybe there'll be a couple more floor crossers, I don't know, but that'll be the weight of the velocity of full steam Mark Carney in the full momentum of what he has. Everybody will have their hand out and high expectations for that fall federal budget, and then out of that will come the spin that he's let people down, he's been disappointing, or whatever, and I think that's where you'll see a real shift of the conversation about what now. He will by then have had a full year and a half as Prime Minister, a clear majority. He had smooth sailing up until now. Now he has a clear majority, no opposition, full weight into a federal budget in the fall. Kuzma is now in the rearview mirror. Donald Trump probably has been mitigated to some degree by the midterms by November. And then where are we at? What's the plan for Canada for 2027, 2028, for an election in 2029? So I think to Kathleen's point a while ago, this is where we're going to be for the next 6 months. But I think 2027 going forward, with Donald Trump having probably lost the midterms and people positioning for the White House, I think the conversation shifts dramatically, and that's an advantage to Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. I think it's an advantage for the NDP to find their voice in a new world. So I think a lot will cascade out of tonight and what it means for 6 months, and then after 6 months in where we're at as a country.
So what I'm hearing is the short-term honeymoon period, but then that'll be in the past at some point.
Well,
everything changes.
It was said earlier, Canadians have given Mr. Carney, and understandably because of these stresses, this first year, change things, undo things Mr. Trudeau did. Mr. Poilievre hasn't wanted an election, neither has the NDP. That has softened somewhat the criticisms and the role of the opposition. And a good opposition should be pressing the government.
Right.
That's going to maybe change tonight in about
I'm all
5
for
more
extending
minutes.
The honeymoon. I mean, we should have the honeymoon extend.
But it's not real life, Marco. The honeymoon is wonderful. You sleep in, but at some point, real life kicks in, and you got to make the kids breakfast. That's right.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure who I'm throwing to, but take it away.
I'm curious to get both of your takes, actually, on this rebranding that we've been seeing recently of Pierre Poilievre, right? And if we're going to see another pivot after today. We've seen, obviously, the physical makeover, the physical rebranding, but also in recent months, a softening on the message. Graham, let me start with you. Does it surprise you that he hasn't got more of a bump as a result of that?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because he's losing caucus. Like, you can rebrand all you want, but if you can't hold your own party together, you're dead. It's untenable. So he's got to get those MPs
Trudeau
to come back.
can tell you all about that.
Trudeau can tell you all, exactly. Christopher Freeland, right? So that doesn't surprise me. I wanted to quickly pick up on what Scott said, and I think a few others. What is not normal here? In Montreal, on the floor of the convention, the largest cheers by Liberals, by far, the largest standing ovations, were about pro-Canadian / anti-American movements by the government of Canada, by the Liberal Party. Standing ovations, loud cheers, 70 cents on the dollar is no longer going to the United States. Another small thing that says a lot, post-Iran war. I had to give my head a shake. There I see the Prime Minister of Canada with all the leaders of Europe in a statement talking about the war in Iran. Now, that makes sense because we weren't in, but it's just odd to see that, he talks about being closer to like-minded countries with values that are similar to Canada's. And he talks about, whether it's Sweden, whether it's UK, whether it's Germany, and then we see it implemented. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. And if you're Pierre Poilievre, to your question, Omar, a roundabout way to get to your question, how do you counter that? He counters that with...
Yeah, what does he do?
Well, he says we're going to get back together with the Americans, which he has said. We're going to get that back on track. And
well, he says it's not permanent.
It's
that
not
the rupture. He's characterizing it as different than the province.
Exactly.
It's not permanent.
Exactly. And I'm wondering where the country is with that, because a lot of people will never forget 51st State. You don't exist as a country from the most powerful man in the world. That was chilling. And I don't think it's gone away, even if he stopped talking about it. And he's saying in a book about the royal family it was kind of a joke and it just got some traction. Or whatever he said, it had a very, very deep impact on the country that a lot of people haven't forgotten. And certainly the Liberal Party hasn't forgotten either.
A comment that was made and then repeated several times after
over
that.
And over
so,
again.
Whether you believe him that it was a joke or not, that's not what, it has shown up to be in reality. We are certainly getting close, just a couple of minutes away. In fact, 2:47 is when the polls close. They'll be closing at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll have more right after this.
Of course, they're breaking again for like the 90th time. Let's see what David Cochrane has to say. I have a feeling this is Cochrane's panel.
We can't point to much that he has done that have made us more resilient up against Trump. So he's getting a bye. The question is, how long is that bye? And it's not going to come. Anything short of 3 Liberal wins tonight is a step back for Carney, because he held all 3 before they became vacant. And to not hold all 3 after would be a step back.
It's 1 vote in Terrebonne. I mean,
how many do you need to win?
Apparently more than 1 when it comes to Terrebonne.
Elections Canada loses a ballot.
That's fine. David, I'm going to wrap things shortly because the polls are going to close. But do you think that the Prime Minister is making the case that the two gentlemen have just talked about, knowing that the issue set for lots of Canadians is also affordability, it's also cost of living?
Yeah, he has a news conference scheduled for tomorrow morning where he says he's going to announce new measures to make life more affordable for Canadians. So we'll see what that turns out to be. But he's been under pressure to do things, particularly when it comes to gas and energy costs for sure. But look, the Trump effect is obviously profound. It is an enormous challenge for the opposition to find oxygen when foreign policy is shaping so much of domestic politics, right? And so the incumbent prime minister, in the form of Mark Carney, benefits not only from the presence of Trump politically, but the contrast with Donald Trump, right? Like Donald Trump is blockading a blockade in Iran right now and picking a fight with the Pope. You know, on the other side of that dynamic is Mark Carney, who is a far more stable and steady just figure. And that, in a lot of ways, Donald Trump is the opposition to Mark Carney right now, because that is the other dominant political force where the push-pull is against in terms of the future direction of the economy of Canada, the international relations of Canada. And that's the dynamic that I think is clouding out all of the space in the minds of most Canadian voters.
Right, and we're about 10 seconds. The polls are going to close shortly. But those circumstances won't stick around forever.
No, but
I don't think anyway. I don't think.
Donald Trump right now is set to be president until 2028.
Yeah.
Right? If they win this majority government, they don't have to have an election until October 15th of 2029. So the majority of the runway is still clouded by President Trump.
Okay. 20 seconds now, under 20 seconds, until the polls close in these three key by-elections that may indeed bring the Liberals their majority. The polls close in 6 seconds, and we will have the results as they come in. CBC News Decision Desk is standing by to bring you all of those results just as soon as they happen. All right, it's happened. The polls have just closed in the three ridings we are watching tonight. Another advantage, it's all in one time zone, unlike a regular general.
All right, let's switch back. I can't stand Rosemary Barton.
I'm Omar Sechedina.
And I'm Vashi Kapelos.
We begin with breaking news. It is 8:30 p.m. That's breaking news Eastern. You can probably tell that from your screen. The polls have now closed in three by-elections that could determine a majority Liberal government. We are standing by for those results from those three ridings we've been talking about all evening. Toronto's University-Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest and Terrebonne, Quebec in the Montreal area.
So the reason that we are anxiously awaiting these results, and they could start coming in any moment now, polls have officially closed, is because these by-elections could cement a majority government for the Liberals, which right now the party holds 171 seats in the House of Commons. They need 172 to give them a majority government. And tonight could provide that, most likely will, because the two ridings that we anticipate getting results for first, Scarborough Southwest and the riding right in downtown Toronto, both of those are held by Liberals for a number of years. They were held by senior cabinet ministers, and they are, considered, you could say, safe ridings for the party. So the anticipation is that they will be able to clinch the majority government for the Liberals.
Traditional Liberal stronghold,
Yeah.
Sebastian. Let's head over to those ridings right now. Let's start with the riding of University-Rosedale, where we find CTV's Heather Wright at Liberal headquarters of Danielle Martin. And Heather, set the scene for us. I mean, what are people saying there tonight? How optimistic are they?
Yeah, I literally just spoke with a member of Danielle Martin's team, and she said that they're feeling good. They're feeling good about tonight, about that campaign that they've run. They say that they've had hundreds of volunteers that have been out knocking on doors, hitting the pavement over the last several weeks, getting out that message. And, voter turnout, Omar, is so important in all of these by-elections, because we've talked about how typically in by-elections, voter turnout is much lower. We know from Elections Canada that about 5,000 fewer ballots were cast in the pre-election advance polls this time around than were a year ago. So certainly there has been a large mobilization effort from all of the parties here in this riding. The Liberals here, they say they're feeling good about their chances of sending Danielle Martin to Ottawa. Of course, she would be only the second MP to represent this riding, which was formed in 2015. It, of course, was held by Chrystia Freeland for many, many years until she resigned earlier this year to take a post with the government of Ukraine. Ukraine. Omar.
And supporters of Danielle obviously hoping that she delivers a victory speech behind you in that stage. Heather, thank you so much. Let's bring in Adrian Gobriel in the downtown Toronto riding of Scarborough Southwest at the headquarters of Liberal Dolly Begum. Adrian.
Yeah, Omar, that's right. We are here slowly. People are starting to stream in. As I look over to my right, I can see Michael Couteau, MP, federal MP with the Liberal Party, here in Scarborough as well. We're in Scarborough Southwest, which is actually the east end of Toronto. Dolly Begum is a really interesting candidate for the Liberal Party. Lots of discussion here in this riding, which has historically been a Liberal stronghold. Dolly, of course, was an MPP with the provincial NDP here in Ontario. She was even the deputy leader when she flipped and left to join the Liberal Party, saying that she wants to be a part of Mark Carney's government. She feels that she can do more to help Scarborough Southwest as a member of the federal Liberals. We're going to have to wait and see if that comes true tonight. But of course, you can see the lights are set, the stage is set behind me, hoping and planning for a celebration as the polls are just closing at this hour. Now, of course, here in this riding, there's Fatima Shaban. She's with the NDP. Diana Filipova with the Conservatives. And so we're going to see how this all shakes down. I was speaking earlier at a polling station with some voters who say that they generally would vote Conservative, though they like Mark Carney, telling me that they feel that he is serious, he means business, and he's going to help them. We're going to have to wait and see how that all shapes up in a short amount of time.
Early results expected shortly. Adrian Gobriel, thank you so much. And CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is in the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne at the Liberal headquarters of Tatiana Auguste. Jen, a single vote separating the Bloc and the Liberals last April. What are voters telling you tonight? And describe the scene for us where you are.
Yeah, earlier this evening, Omar, I heard some volunteers at the polling station. I overheard them. They were talking about the fact that they were planning to be there late into the night counting. That's probably not a scoop. They're expecting it to be quite close, but they were packing snacks, they said, because they felt that it could be quite a late night for them counting those votes. Now we're here at headquarters where they're expecting to hear the results. There are some MPs milling about here, people waiting for the arrival of some of the results, and so looking closely at that screen. There have been voters at the polling station, a steady trickle, really quite late into the evening tonight. I saw many people just rushing to that polling station, wanting to make that every vote count. And they're saying that they really want this to be a clear winner result. They want to be able to move on from this election. They're saying, you know, they had their say, they want to have their say once more. And they're expecting this to be really quite a tight race, Omar.
All right, I'll pick that one up again. Geneviève Beauchemin reporting from Terrebonne. Thanks, Geneviève. She's talking about how significant the results there could be. We are understanding from Elections Canada that the final results in that riding, because it's so complicated, there's a ballot where you have to write out the name because there's a long list of people who are running. Those results will likely, Elections Canada is saying, come overnight. That we are anticipating something, some form of the results or some portion of them will be released in advance of that. Just cautioning, we might not know by the end of tonight what exactly is happening in Terrebonne. We do anticipate, however, conversely, we will know more about the two Toronto ridings, which again, from a mathematical perspective, are all that the Liberals need in order to form a majority government as of this evening. Let's talk a little bit more about how people are voting ahead of today, because there was some significant advance polling turnout numbers, particularly in that Montreal area riding. Heather Butts and Nick Manos are here to talk about that.
Vashi, thank you. Yes, these numbers tell such a great story, not just the numbers here on election night, Nick, but the numbers beforehand. Those advance polls really tell a unique story. So we'll take a look at those in these three by-election ridings that we are taking a very close look at this evening. Let's stick with the Toronto ridings here, Nick. University-Rosedale, Scarborough Southwest, Liberal strongholds. These ridings are not too far apart. They're in the downtown Toronto core, for those not that familiar with the city. Nick, what do you make of these numbers? Around 9,000, 10,000 for Scarborough Southwest.
You know, it's interesting, Heather. Whenever I think of the advance vote, I think of two things: brute force organization on the ground and the competitiveness of a riding. And, you know, you meld those two things together and they yield very high advance polling numbers as the parties try to get their vote out. And what's clear, at least, is that when we look in those two ridings in Ontario, that, you know, it looks, at least, I think, for some voters that it might not necessarily be as competitive and that the advance vote is not as high in those two ridings.
And if I take a step back here, we take a look at the riding of Terrebonne. 18,200 people showing up for the advance polls. We know that it was just a 1-vote difference last election. What do you make of this?
Well, you know, the thing is what's clear here is that for this particular riding, the organization is strong for both the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois. Those voters are highly motivated, and it's a competitive race. Vashi was talking about how we might need to wait late to get the results from Elections Canada, and I think a lot of that has to do with how those two front-running parties are mobilizing, because the stakes are quite high, not just for Mark Carney and the Liberals. The stakes are very high for Blanchet and the Bloc Québécois, because if they don't win tonight, that's bad news for them.
Nick, we talk so much about getting the vote out, and you talked about boots on the ground, getting people knocking on doors, helping voters get to those polling stations. Typically, with by-elections, the advance polls aren't necessarily as high. This is a pretty significant number. People know it really matters most there.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, the thing is, Heather, is that in many of these by-elections, the voter turnout is not as high, and that's why the advance poll numbers are not as high. But I think Terrebonne is going to be the exception. You know, the thing is, it's still going to be really interesting to look at the results from Scarborough Southwest and University-Rosedale, but I think Terrebonne is going to be the one that is going to be on tenterhooks tonight, especially until we see the advance polls, because we don't know who will win the advance polls. And when you have 18,000, I think it's about 18% or thereabouts of all the votes that could potentially be cast already in the bag, when that advance poll number comes out, hold on tight, because it's going to give us an indication as to who might have the upper hand in the count.
Okay, hold on tight. Nick Nanos, thank you so much. Omar and Vashi, will send it back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Heather and Nick. Let's swing over to our strategists. We've talked a lot about the government and other opposition parties, Kathleen, but Nick brings up a good point. The by-election in Terrebonne is very significant for the Bloc Québécois and for the party's leader.
Yeah. I think if there's somebody who really stands to be a loser tonight, it could be the Bloc leader. If he can't hold on to Terrebonne, it will be significant for his party. Remember, when in history have we seen the Supreme Court overturn the results in an election? It is significant for that reason. And while the Bloc, you know, is territory Quebec, they can mass all their resources in that one riding. The Liberals had an advantage in a few ways. They got to call the by-election timing. They had their convention just days before, just this past weekend, where they could mobilize all of those, people to pull the vote, and they could put all the money they wanted to in terms of up to around $300,000 by pulling money from from University-Rosedale, from pulling money from Scarborough Southwest, and plowing it into Terrebonne. And I suspect that they did that. It feels like it's going to be, a very close riding, mainly because of this long ballot initiative. But I think it's Blanchet that has the most to lose tonight. Like, certainly we've talked about Pierre Poilievre and what's at stake for him in terms of his leadership. But I think if Blanchet doesn't pull this out, it weakens the Bloc.
Let's talk a little bit about the other opposition parties, Shakir. Let's say the Liberals are able to, once we start getting results in, secure a majority. There's, one camp that will say it makes Pierre Poilievre's job a lot harder, particularly in managing his own caucus, which is also already a vulnerability. But there's another that says this actually gives him some time to take advantage and try to capitalize on any shine that wears off, the honeymoon stage or whatever we're calling it. Where do you fall in that?
I think it gives him time, but it's going to be contingent on Mark Carney not delivering on the promises he's putting out there, the government making significant missteps, and we'll just have to see if that plays out. I think ultimately, James has said this before, Scott has said it before as well, Mark Carney's selling a picture of unity. It's a very positive message, and it seems Canadians are buying that. Pierre has a very hard job. No matter what happens tonight, he's going to be the leader of the official opposition. His job is to oppose, to hold the government to account, and he does that very well, but he does it in a very negative way that can be very off-putting. I think moving forward, in his majority, he still has to hold the government to account, but he has to find a way to shift that tone just slightly, still prosecute his case against the government, but not be overly aggressive where listen, I'm part of the base. I'm going to vote for the guy no matter what. I'm not the guy you need to persuade. That other swath of Canadians who don't want to see that level of negativity, who don't want to see the over-aggressive tone and the abrasive tone, how do you prosecute your case in the opposition without being that guy? And it's going to be a very tricky dance, but I think that's the next task for him after the government gets a majority.
I think he would argue, and the people around him, Scott, would argue over the past number of weeks, that's what they're trying to do, right? With the speeches that they made in Europe and in the United States, with the podcast appearances, which were very different in tone than the debates that take place in the House of Commons, for example.
I just don't know if it has any effect. I don't know if we can, to be fair to him, expect that it's going to have an effect. For instance, in tonight's vote totals. I mean, they kind of, Scarborough, they came in at 30%, I think. Rosedale, 24. You know, are they going to match those numbers? Terrebonne, obviously, 18 is a critical number. But I'll tell you one thing that I think is complicating for Mark Carney out of all of this, and it also speaks to the issue of time. People say, well, now this is going to give Pierre Poilievre time to, you know, rebrand, wait for the government to fall, that sort of stuff. I think the honeymoon's going to be over for Mark Carney when the war with Trump is over. And one of the challenges that happens about tonight, he gets his majority. People say, that's fine, we can go to sleep, we don't have to think about politics and casting ballots and waiting up all night to see the result for 3 years. I don't think Carney can wait 3 years. He cannot afford to run the next campaign without Trump front and center. So I don't think he's going to call an election this fall. I don't think he's going to call an election maybe next spring. But he's got to call an election sometime in the next couple of years. And I think that's going to be interesting. How does that work now that he has a majority mandate? He wants to get an election while he still has Trump to match up against.
And Scott, as you were speaking, we had some early results come in there from the riding of Terrebonne, and you can see right now that the Liberal Tatiana Auguste has an 11-vote lead, so small lead right over the Bloc candidate. I want to ask, and either of you can, any of you can take this. Quebec is such a fascinating political case study in this country. We talk about the province every election. What bearing is what's happening provincially in terms of the provincial politics in that country? How is that impacting the race that we're seeing in Terrebonne, if at all? Kathleen, you want to start?
Yeah, well, as you know, the CAQ just elected a new premier on the weekend. They're going to be facing an election themselves later this fall. I think it does impact. I mean, the Bloc weaknesses is tied to the Parti Québécois. They use the same machinery. So I think that's all going to play out in this actual election. Carney is popular in the province of Quebec. Mm-hmm. But what's fascinating to me is the numbers that Heather and Nick just put out. If, in fact, there was 18,000 advance votes in Terrebonne, that's, you know, a significant amount of the eligible voters, more than you would normally see in by-elections. Normally, by-elections don't have great turnout, right? But there is a good turnout, it sounds like, today in advance polls in that riding because of the significance of the vote, the overturning of the Supreme Court, and just how important this vote means.
Shakir and Scott, any other thoughts?
I just think on the provincial level, you're seeing the PQ that was soaring in the polls, and now they're kind of neck and neck, at least in the horse race numbers with the Liberals. Yeah. I think ultimately people don't want to talk about separatism. They want to know how Canada can work together to combat what's happening in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a codifying effect of Trump again. Suddenly, separatism, slicing ourselves into smaller portions, makes no sense when we have this external threat of Donald Trump, and it's providing a kite for Mark Carney, not a francophone, not somebody that Quebecers would naturally say one of ours, and yet he's becoming more popular.
Actually, we should clarify at the bottom of our screen we're showing a ticker or a crawl, the standings right now. 172 is, of course, majority, but we should clarify that is elected or leading. And what we're seeing with those early results in Terrebonne is that there is a lead, a small lead right now, but it is still extremely
also very early. Yeah, there's
exactly.
only, I think, 2 polls report, 2 polls, like the very, very beginning of all of this.
Very preliminary results.
We'll be clear when it's done, and if there is a majority to call, you'll hear it very clearly here.
Absolutely.
First, though, we'll take a quick commercial break, and we're back in a moment with more.
Holy smokes. Okay, let's see what... Oh, wow. What did we just tune into?
Your party said it knocked on 46,000 doors. I didn't know. I think you didn't do each of them personally, but you have been out here. Tell me what people are telling you.
So yes, indeed. I think it's the 5th time I've been to Terrebonne. It's going to be I think a long night, but I think we did some really good work. The ballot question in Terrebonne was clear, which is, in the world of instability, the party that can provide you the stability you're searching is actually the Liberal Party and Prime Minister Carney. And we also had a very good candidate, Tatiana Auguste, which has been in the House of Commons for now a year, has been able to really get the support from her colleagues, be able to gather experience, and it really showed. So we worked extremely hard, and I'm very proud to see that things are I think, going well, but I don't want to take anything for granted.
You spoke of stability. Regardless of the results tonight, it's likely your party will have a majority in the House of Commons tomorrow, in part thanks to 5 floor crossers. Are you worried at all about undermining Canadian democracy, or looking like that might have happened?
Listen, I think Canadian democracy has clear rules, which includes the fact that MPs, when they're elected, are also allowed to take decisions based on what their voters are telling them at the moment they're taking that decision. And clearly we saw that we were able to attract MPs on both sides of the spectrum, from the NDP, from the Conservatives, at a time where we know that we are dealing with a very unpredictable, to say the least, president south of the border, in a time where we need to be able to work together to build one strong Canadian economy for all. And so I think that clearly we've been able to do the work that was necessary to able to attract them to us. And, so in that sense, I think that it is an argument that Mr. Poilievre has been particularly using at a time where he should look at himself in the mirror and ask himself why he's not able to maintain his own caucus together.
What specifically do you hope to achieve with a majority that you couldn't with a minority?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of frustration over the years. Particularly, I'll give you an example. I think it's been 2 or 3 parliaments that were trying to pass an important legislation regarding the tech giants and being able to protect our kids online, being able to protect vulnerable people online, well, of course, protecting freedom of speech, which is fundamental, but also making sure that we protect Canadian data online. And there's been so much filibustering or just overall, how can I say, obstruction on the part of the Conservatives that we have never been able to pass these legislations. So now I think this is a good example that I think we won't take anything for granted, of course, and the results are not in yet. But I think that we can work, of course, again with the opposition, but being able also to pass important legislation.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, back to you, Rosie.
Okay, Rafi.
No, can't do Rosie.
Well, it appears as though those, of course, would be the early voting results. And so there has been a lot of work that was done on the ground here, a lot of work by the Liberal Party to get out that vote early. So there were hundreds of volunteers that have fanned out across the riding here to try to convince people to go to the polls early. And some of the Liberal Party members are saying that they're very proud of the work that they did in that regard. And that may be reflected in some of these early results that are coming in so far, because so much work was put into it. And at the time, of course, this was before we saw all this floor crossing action. And so a lot of people were saying that at that point it was such a consequential election. They're still saying it was an important election. They still want this riding. They say, of course, that they were very proud of flipping it, taking it away from the Bloc Québécois. And so they still are working the ground here. They were still working very hard into the day today, saying that they really want to get the vote out as much as possible. But some of those results so far could be those early voting results. And that could reflect, as I say, just how many people were knocking on doors, how many ministers were in this riding, dozens of them just going door to door to try to convince people of the Terrebonne riding to go out and vote.
Right, Genevieve, thank you. And CTV's Matt Gilmore is in the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne as well, but at the Bloc Québécois headquarters of Nathalie Sinclair-Desgagnés. And Matt, we know that every single vote does count. And in fact, the Bloc candidate made this part of her campaign slogan. She said that une voix qui compte. It seems as though this could be a pretty long night. We're already hearing celebrations, it sounds like, behind you.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at the screen, so I'm not 100% sure what happened, but I will just take a quick look, and it looks like, based on the results that they have displayed on the screen, that Sinclair Degagné has just jumped in front of the Liberal candidate. So, you were mentioning it's very early and that the Liberals had a brief lead there. There's a lot of confidence still in this room that it is very early and that it's sort of going to go back and forth throughout the night. When this election took place in the fall, the general election, remember, it was decided by just one vote. And so it's a very close race, and it will be interesting to see now, several months removed from that original race, how the sentiment regarding Mark Carney's performance has changed over time, whether there's more support for him or less. The Bloc Québécois has been, originally when this was potentially going to be a decider, they were saying vote for us to prevent the minority. Now they're saying vote with your heart, hoping that people vote for the Bloc Québécois in this one.
And I imagine we'll be seeing that seesawing as those results come in through the evening. Right now, a single vote separating the Bloc Québécois candidate and the Liberal candidate. So it is a very tight race, and we were expecting that heading into tonight. Matt, thank you so much. Let's bring in Adrian Gabriel in the downtown Toronto riding of Scarborough Southwest at the headquarters of Liberal Dolly Begum. Adrian.
Starting to fill up here as people are awaiting what many hope will be a win for Dolly Begum. Now speaking with people at a polling station just across the street actually earlier today and hearing mixed reviews. Hearing some saying that they normally vote Conservative, though that they feel that Mark Carney is serious, that he means business, and he will push through an agenda that they believe is favorable. Others saying they don't like candidates who flip-flop. Dolly Begum, of course, flipped. She was a provincial NDP, MPP, the deputy leader of Ontario's NDP party at Queen's Park. She left Merritt Stiles and the provincial NDP, came over to the Liberals. She's the candidate tonight. This has been a Liberal stronghold for many, many years. Bill Blair, of course, holding this one for more than 10 years before taking on a post in the United Kingdom. And just moments ago was also speaking with Liberal MP Michael Couteau. He says he's been knocking on the doors. He says he feels the momentum tonight here in Scarborough Southwest. We're going to have to wait and see what the vote tells us.
And Adrian, as you were speaking, we had a screen there that showed that Dolly Begum actually had a 42-vote lead. Again, want to caution our viewers that this is still early, but this is one of the Liberal strongholds that we've been talking about all evening. A 42-vote lead over her Conservative rival. Of course, supporters of Dolly Begum will be hoping for that to hold through the evening. We'll be checking in that riding periodically throughout the evening. Over now to the Toronto riding of University-Rosedale, where we find CTV's Heather Wright at the Liberal headquarters of Danielle Martin. Danielle Martin, of course, Heather, a former, or a physician, I should say, current physician. What are you hearing from people there?
They're feeling good. I mean, this is quite a party atmosphere, Omar. The food is being passed. The drinks are flowing. We heard a little while ago from sort of the host of the evening, hoping that this is going to be a celebratory evening. Yet, now you mentioned Danielle Martin. She is a physician. She's a healthcare executive. She gained a lot of attention back in 2014 when she testified at a U.S. subcommittee meeting in the United States Senate, really touting the benefits of universal healthcare. She's a proponent of pharmacare, and so this is the candidate for the Liberals in this by-election. This is the party. They're hoping it's going to be a celebratory one. Some of the other candidates she's running against, Don Hodgson with the Conservatives. He is a business owner in the mortgage industry. Serena Purdy with the NDP, and Andrew Massey with the Greens. Now, as we've talked about all night, Omar, this is one of the ridings tonight that is considered a stronghold. But one thing we are going to be watching for are those vote numbers. Now, we know that advanced polls, advanced voting for this riding were down. We'll have to wait and see which party was able to mobilize their supporters the most as they continue to count these ballots.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. And actually, the poll's closing about a half an hour ago, and we are getting some of those early results. If viewers are just joining us now, let's recap some of those ridings.
Yeah, we're getting some results in Scarborough Southwest. So we had some of our colleagues reporting there from Dolly Begum's. Oh, actually, what you're looking at right now is Terrebonne instead. So we're getting some ridings from Terrebonne, some polls reporting from Terrebonne at this moment.
A single vote there.
Yeah, again, the story of the last election was a single vote. clinch the win, and the same thing is happening right now. We've got about 2% in that riding of the polls reporting with that. And then here you've got Scarborough Southwest, where we've got even fewer polls reporting. I think at this point, 1.5%, and you've got a 42 vote lead for Dolly Begum over, as you mentioned before, her Conservative opponent. And then finally, we're looking to University-Rosedale, where Danielle Martin is running. So far, we have no results in. The latest I checked, at least on the Elections Canada website, showed me that that was a fact. We can roll through that in a moment. We've got some more votes there for Dolly Begum coming in, some more polls reporting. And yeah, you can see that so far no polls reporting yet in University-Rosedale, but we are anticipating they will come in fairly short order. No anticipated delays outside of Terrebonne at this point. Lots of advance votes they're able to count early in the Quebec riding.
And Vashi, as you mentioned, this is still very preliminary, still very early. We know from Elections Canada it could be a particularly long night in Terrebonne, but if you looked at those earlier screens, it showed how many of the polls were reporting, and in several cases, you know, there were one or maybe two polls
it's all
reporting.
less than 5%.
Exactly. So it's still, especially in Terrebonne, could be a long night. And we just want to also clarify, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see that the Liberals are elected or leading in 172. That does not mean that CTV has yet declared a majority government, but they are elected or leading, we should say. And so that's why that number is at 172. But that call, and trust me, you will know when that call is made. If the Liberals get a majority, you'll know about that. But if, in case you're wondering why that number is at 172 right now, that is the reason. Let's head over to Sandy Bernaldo and the political panel. Sandy, the story right now is pretty much playing out as we anticipated.
Okay, now, Omar, we are prepared to make a call. Right. It is completely unofficial. We have no results. But Nathan Cullen here said he has the solution.
We're going back to the Supreme Court, I believe. That one vote victory is going to happen again. What are the odds? Calshi did not have it on its markets, but it's actually that advance vote is most interesting to me in Quebec.
Okay.
Because of what Scott and others talked about. If resources were really poured in for the advance, particularly by the Liberals, but probably by the Bloc as well. Advances sometimes don't tell you what the result really is going to be, but sometimes they're very indicative. And if the advance are the first things we see, which is what we're expecting out of Quebec, and the Bloc are holding or doing well, then I think the prediction of them being able to get that seat back is much stronger, given all of the effort of those hundreds of Liberal volunteers, et cetera, et cetera. That'll be an interesting play. But imagine if it came down to one vote again.
Wouldn't that
only
be
in Canada.
something?
Just, yeah, fantastic.
Marco, you're itching to say something about voter turnout.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Toronto it is playing out as expected, but the one exception is what's going on in Terrebonne. And if I took down the note right, it's that the total advance poll turnout was 18,200, which is just shy of the same total number of advance polls that were cast in the 2025 general election. Exactly. Now, why is that important? Because you would expect a proportionate drop-off to equal roughly the turnout of the vote in a by-election, which hovers around 30 to 40%. So this number is about 90% of what the turnout was in the general election. I think that speaks to what was described earlier, the brute force of the organization on the ground. And it is very true that the Liberal Party were pouring volunteers, ministers, money, caucus colleagues, and let's not forget, just coming out of the convention where there were roughly 4,500 people there. I know there were a lot of buses that were going back and forth there. So I think it speaks to clearly the motivation for the party to hold the riding. And I think on the flip side, there is also the potential that the Bloc is also using un vote qui compte, you know, the Supreme Court nullification as a way to give voice to French language, French culture, you know, the need to have a voice and a check and balance in Parliament. So as the results start to pour in more, we'll get a sense of whether or not this is going to be indeed razor tight, or whether or not we could be in for a bit of a surprise.
Okay, but I thought I did hear you say that the Liberals might take it?
Well, I think it speaks to just how much motivation there is. But I don't think there's anybody taking it for granted at all. It certainly seems that there's been a big push to get many, many votes out in the advance poll. What will matter is obviously today as well. I mean, there's still the lion's share of the vote on election day, and that's the moment that we're living in right now. So we'll see, but I think that is a number that certainly raises an eyebrow, and I think as the night plays out, we'll see where it goes.
Okay, James.
Well, I was going to say, Terrebonne's a very interesting riding. Think of the riding historically. Now, the margins of the riding have changed a little bit over the years as a result of redistribution and all that. Terrebonne, in contemporary history, it went progressive. It was liberal in the 1960s and 70s. It was progressive conservative in '88 over free trade. It's been a Bloc Québécois riding basically since the Bloc Québécois has been contesting campaigns since 1993. There was one deviation from that with Jack Layton and his Orange Wave in 2011. It was held by the New Democrats for one term, and then it went back. But so, I think in the normal order of things, in the normal order of Canadian politics in the last 20 or 30 years, Terrebonne probably would be like the 200th riding that the Liberals would win. Liberals shouldn't win Terrebonne historically. They don't historically win it. They don't. Yeah. It says something about the shifts that have happened on the ground there as a consequence of global affairs and people being prepared to consider new options as a result of the perceived threat of Donald Trump, the real threat of Donald Trump, and also the shakeup in Quebec provincial politics, where you have 5 political parties that all have reasonable bases of support that are all in play there. So this is a district that's gone Liberal, Bloc Québécois, and Progressive Conservative.
And no floor crossers yet from Quebec.
But from the Bloc? Now that would be a story.
They would be taken. But we were saying earlier that if the Liberals are successful in this riding, a lot of it will be due to Mr. Carney. Then I'm not saying this, and don't take it the wrong way, but the reverse is also true. If the Bloc are able to hold it despite Mr. Carney's popularity, then that's just something to take note of, that the personality of the leadership matters to a point. And as James said, this is a very diverse riding, but it has a very strong history. And I think the Bloc's strategy, frankly, was quite smart in this riding. And how great for those of us who care about democracy, when we talk to so many voters who say, my vote never counts, who cares? We'll always say, remember Terrebonne. Every single time you vote, it could be consequential. It's good for us who believe in this whole system.
Okay. Omar Vashi, back to you.
All right, Sandy, thank you so much. Let's bring in Heather, CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin, who is in that Montreal riding of Terrebonne right now. And we've been talking about the Liberal organization leading up to today. Cabinet ministers who went there, the people that the Liberals brought in to stump for Tatiana Auguste. Jen, you're with Mélanie Joly right now, I see.
Absolutely. Minister Joly, tell me a little bit about how much work the Liberals put into this riding.
A lot, actually. We're very proud of the work we've done. I think the ballot question was clear. The ballot question was who can provide stability in a world of instability and a much more chaotic and divided world. And we know that the answer to that is Prime Minister Carney and obviously our government. We also had a very strong candidate, Tatiana Auguste, that had also past experience in the House of Commons for the last year. She was also able to get support from many of her caucus members. She actually, became a very strong candidate as the days were, going on, and I'm really, really proud of her. And so, yes, we put everything we had in this riding, in the sense that more than 700 volunteers, a lot of different MPs getting involved, and it's going to be difficult until the end. But we're hoping for the best. It's a very historically Bloc riding here.
Well, indeed, but earlier on, this was perhaps the majority hinged on this particular riding. Things have changed now.
Yeah.
What does it mean to still hold on to this riding at this point? Does it mean less now that it's not quite that significant here?
Every vote counts and every seat counts. So we will never take anything for granted. And we know that, when it comes to a majority or minority, it has never been really the conversation here. It was much more, who is the right person for these times? We're in a pivotal time in our country. We need to be able also to have the right person and with the right government, with the right representation to support workers dealing with the impacts of the trade war. One thing that is really important for viewers to understand is right here in Terrebonne, there are a lot of people that are working in the steel transformation industry. They've been impacted by the tariffs, jobs, layoffs, and at the same time, lots of businesses trying to pivot. There's also an important defense. General Dynamics is here, so just nearby, there's a defense industry that is bit by bit reviving, and so what is the entire plan of our government is actually having clear impacts here in this riding. So that's why it was important for us to be able also to convey the message linked to the fact that, there are lots of things we can't control in the world, but we can control how we build a strong economy, and also we protect jobs. And that's, I think, will be the, what we'll see tonight. But I don't want to take anything for granted, but I think that it will go well.
Although I did hear you say, it's a traditional block riding, it's a long-standing block riding. Is that an admission that it might be tough?
Well, it is tough. Last time the results were one vote difference. What else can I tell you? And the Supreme Court took its decision. Of course, we respected the justice's decision, and so that's why there was a new election called. And so we got involved very much. And I think also Terrebonne is a riding, for those who don't necessarily know the geography of Montreal, is a bit out at the on the outskirts of Montreal. It is very much more changing as Montreal and Quebec is changing. And so the second generation of first immigrants coming to Quebec, a very important community from Haiti, also from Northern Africa. And so things are changing in across the country, particularly also here. And so I think that could be actually very favorable in general for a candidate that is from the Asian community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you.
All right, that's Geneviève Beauchemin with Minister of Industry Melanie Joly. They're standing by in Terrebonne. Very competitive riding. We're going to swing over to another riding, perhaps less competitive. We've got no results in yet, but certainly an expectation that the Liberals will be able to hold this riding that they've held now for the last 10 years. Heather Wright is over in University-Rosedale with another minister, this one for artificial intelligence, Evan Solomon. Over to you, Heather.
Hi, Vasha. Yes, I'm here with Evan Solomon. A year ago, you were elected to office. Did you think that there might be a by-election a year later that could determine a majority government?
First of all, we've got three great candidates tonight. And, before anybody's thinking about what the result of that is, we got to win the by-elections. It's teams work hard. Here, Danielle Martin, I canvassed with her. I know Danielle. She's a doctor, She's a world-class physician. She's lived in the community. She's done great work. And in Terrebonne, Tatiana's fantastic. That's going to be a hard-fought race. And then, of course, I've been with Dolly in Scarborough Southwest. The thing is, in any campaign, you get your head down. You just are trying to win the riding. The community's got to get to know you, and the focus on this is not about what the overall result is. You got to win today. And look at this crowd. There's a great team of volunteers, and I think they're focused on tonight. What's going to happen? We'll see, but it's going to happen at the ballot box. That's the key.
But with a majority, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. If the Liberals do win a majority, life does get a little bit easier when it comes to governing. We know that the Prime Minister is going to make an announcement tomorrow about cost of living. I mean, what do the priorities become, or do they stay the same if there is a Liberal government majority?
We are governing, and I think the Prime Minister is leading to build this country strong. He says it every day. To empower citizens, to protect the things that we love, our public health care, which is what Danielle will help to do, our communities. That plan is not going to change. The Prime Minister likes to say, no games. We're doing this. There's no, as he said, we're not proroguing. We are governing together to lead the country in as nonpartisan, as non-divisive a way as possible. We're trying to unite people, and I think people are coming to his message. They're responding to a message that is really not about political games and partisanship. It's about building. It's about building affordable homes. It's about protecting our health care. It's about building up our military. It's about building major projects. It's about launching the community fund. None of that's going to change. Canadians have seen the strategy. They know what Prime Minister Carney does. And that message is only going to continue. Do we want, obviously, to win these three? Absolutely. And they're great candidates. But to me, the message is about unity. And it's an invitation to all Canadians to build together. And, if you vote Liberal, great. If you don't, you're still part of this country to build together, unite together, and work together. And that's what the foundational message has been, is, and will be.
There are rumors as many as 9 other MPs might be looking to join the Liberal caucus. What do you say to critics of floor crossers and of the government? Some have said, perhaps floor crossers shouldn't be accepted into government. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, whatever happens tonight is going to happen at the ballot box. I think that's a really core message for Canadians, whatever outcome for a minority or majority government. Floor crossing is a long tradition in our democracy. It's been accepted by the Conservatives, the Liberals. This has happened. There will be opportunities, obviously, at the ballot box in any federal election to respond to the movement of an MP. But it is a testament that what the Prime Minister is doing, this unifying message, people want to be part of. There are people that have crossed the floor that said, you know what, I don't want to tear down, I want to build up. I like his message of unity. I like the fact that he's focused on buying Canadian. I like what he's doing on cost of living and affordability. So they want to join. And again, voters, they're serving their communities. They represent their communities, and they will face the ballot box. But it is a long and established tradition. Conservatives have accepted it. And, if people want to join Mr. Carney's mission, this is about unity. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. And I think, are there more conversations going on? Absolutely. There's conversations all the time with people, and that's a good thing.
All right, Evan Solomon, the Minister of AI, Digital Innovation and Economic Development for Southern Ontario.
Wow, I got it right. Title.
Back to you guys.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. And in case any of our viewers are wondering right now, hey, we have results from Terrebonne, early results coming in. We've got results coming in from Scarborough Southwest. Why don't we have results coming in from University-Rosedale? We put that question to Elections Canada. Elections Canada is basically saying they don't know why, but they're saying that those results should be coming in a few minutes' time. So for the full transparency, that's what they're telling us. So that's what we're telling you. But their assurances are that those results from University-Rosedale, where Heather Wright was just speaking to us, those results should be coming in momentarily. Let's go right now to Scarborough Southwest and to Adrienne Gabriel, who's at the headquarters for Liberal Dolly Begum, who is increasing her lead. Adrienne, what's the atmosphere like?
The atmosphere is quite jovial here. That lead that you're just talking about there, those early numbers we're seeing come in right now, Omar, are what many here have expected. Dolly Begum is a well-known commodity here in Scarborough Southwest, though not with the Liberal Party, with the NDP, the provincial NDP, where just recently she was the deputy leader at Queen's Park here in Toronto. She, of course, flipped. She came over to the Liberal Party. I've been speaking to some of those who've been knocking on doors recently. They say that they've heard a lot of support for the Liberal Party here in this riding over the last number of days. They're really feeling that momentum. Now, interestingly as well, I was also speaking with Liberal MP Michael Couteau, who's a neighboring MP here in Scarborough, and I asked him, Dolly Begum is from, traditionally an NDP left-leaning politician. Just a couple days ago, we had a Conservative, Marilyn Goudou, crossover. I asked him if there's a concern as the Liberal Party casts a wide net that they could potentially be alienating some voters. He said he didn't think so. He said that's proof and point that Mark Carney is governing. He can cross the floor, that he can work with people from a diverse background, diverse political background. And tonight, right here this evening, they are waiting. The stage is set behind me, and they are anticipating a Liberal win here very soon, Omar.
All right, Adrienne, as you were speaking, Dolly Begum has maintained her lead. Again, still very early. I believe I saw only 5 polls of the 188 actually who were reporting in that riding. So a lead for Dolly Begum, but still very early. We're going to take a quick break right now. You're watching a CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026. As we have been mentioning,
Okay, just checking. This is live updated. So they were just talking about how University-Rosedale wasn't having any votes coming in. As you can see, there is votes coming in now, and it's leading Liberal. Scarborough Southwest is heavily leading Liberal, and we haven't gotten any more ticks for Terrebonne. So far, it's still Bloc leading that. and we will switch over to see what the David Cochran has got to say about this.
People in Labrador to cross the floor. It got really tangly, but that's how they.
Well, there has been a by-election. This is because I have good producers that turned a minority into a majority, and that was in PEI in 2020.
By-election, yes, but the defection.
But no, not a defection part. Yeah, that's a good one. We'll add that to our pub trivia. Let's bring you some more results if we can. We'll start with University-Rosedale again, where again the votes continue to be counted. A few more polls reporting there. Danielle Martin with a 66 vote lead at this stage. Let's go to the next riding to see where those results are at as we wait to see if the Liberals can go ahead and clinch their majority. That is Scarborough Southwest. 7 of the 188 polls reporting the lead, Dolly Begum's lead, growing now to 200 votes. Not surprising, given perhaps the way the Liberals have performed in that riding in the past. Let's head back to Terrebonne, the riding that is going to be a bit of a street fight here between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois. It is unchanged, still just 1 vote lead. Honestly, those poor candidates, what a time they've been through, both of them. Emotional turmoil, and apparently it continues tonight. Perhaps they'll get a definitive result, but we have been told by Elections Canada that the vote count may be long, meaning that the final results may not happen until late tonight and into tomorrow morning. That, of course, in part because of that write-in ballot that they have had to put in place there to deal with the electoral reform protest longest ballot movement. Vanden, I haven't talked to you in a while here. I'll just bring you in maybe on University-Rosedale and these initial results. Certainly Danielle Martin starts, I think, with a certain advantage because of her name recognition. You know, she used to be on CBC all the time as one of the key doctors that we would go to. She's well known in the community, to your point. How much does that play into particularly a by-election where people aren't paying as much attention? The fact that you might have that kind of name recognition, is that a big factor?
Yeah, I mean, I also mentioned like how we got to Dolly Begum, so I think similar things. Community advocates, something that people knew, and the type of riding. Like this is the type of riding where, and I spent most of the day in that riding today, where people will be a bit more tuned in. So they would be watching different things and tuned into, you know, whatever it was her congressional moment. It could be what she's talking about at CBC. But I found that in this riding, because of the university students, a lot of professors, and just the dynamics of it, it does definitely give a bump in general. It's never a bad thing, but it's also good to find. It's how you find a good candidate who can resonate the most, and it's easier to find someone from community who is well known to at least get some people who aren't engaged to notice it a bit more.
Yeah, so parachuting someone in during a by-election is probably not the best idea. Although we saw it done with one person, the Conservative leader, but he had some name recognition there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was different before. I know John McCallum was from Oakville. He represented Markham Unionville for a long time, then Markham Thornhill. But I think now with social media and people just needing more from the elected officials, you can't get away with it the same way. And that's what confuses me about Scarborough and the Conservative candidate there. The Conservatives would be amazing at something I worked on a lot in politics, which is community outreach. You know, Jason Kenney was the best at it and would have connections to the Tamil community, to the Muslim community, to different communities that exist. And it looks like they didn't even try. Like there's a candidate not from the riding. It doesn't look like they reflect any communities in that riding. So it does surprise me. So having someone who understands the riding, especially as communities do get closer with social media and they pay attention more, is going to be important.
What do you think of that, Fred, as a former campaign manager in terms of...
All right, let's switch back.
She's MP for Saint Jean, just south of Montreal, and we're here to sort of talk about how the Bloc is feeling today so far.
Pretty optimistic, always cautiously optimistic. Of course, we knew from the start that it would be a tight race. We know that we'll be going to bed quite late, but we are quite confident that we'll go to bed with a smile. So that's something that we could feel on the ground while doing door-to-door canvassing. The people telling us that they would vote for the Bloc did it with enthusiasm. They were smiling. Some of them told us, well, we didn't vote last time, or we didn't vote for you, but we won't miss it this time. We'll be behind you. You can count on us. So it was a very enthusiastic response. So it gives us optimism for tonight.
To miss out by just one vote last time around, and now to be having the opportunity to redo this campaign, what different approaches is the Bloc Québécois taking this time around?
Well, I think the circumstances themselves are quite different. Back in 2025, one of the questions was who will be speaking to Trump, who will be his counterpart. That's not a question anymore. We already know the color of the government. And in the beginning of the campaign this time, one of the questions was the majority. It faded with people crossing the floor. So it gave us space to really talk about the issues, the local issues that people have at heart. Housing, the elderly, the high-speed rail. That was something that we heard quite a lot about. So it gave us space to really talk about things that mattered to people. So it was a different campaign than last time.
And I guess, like, what kind of support and what kind of enthusiasm? Talk a little bit about that kind of what you're hearing from voters when you go door to door.
It was really optimistic, and I think we could see from the participation rate, it was quite high for a by-election, and people really knew the importance of voting this time, so they were enthusiastic, and we were confident that they would indeed go out and vote. So it was a very positive campaign, very local in our case. We were the only one to have a platform to discuss the local issues, so I think it was a good visit card for us, and I'm pretty sure it will make a difference in the end.
If the Bloc does win this seat back from the Liberals, it's a seat that you've held for a very long time. To lose it and then to win it back, what would that mean for the party going forward?
It would mean an extra voice in the Parliament, a voice for Terrebonne and a voice for Quebec, instead of having a voice for the government in Terrebonne. That's going to make a big difference. And one of the things also that was mentioned from door to door was that the level of service provided by Nathalie St-Clair-Desgagnés she was in office was very good. A lot of people told us, well, I had an issue, I had a problem, she fixed it, she listened, she was really, she was on the ground, she was listening, she was present. So that's going to be a great addition to the caucus, but also a lovely gain for the population. And that's really what we're aiming for, a stronger voice for Quebec, for French, for culture, for secularism, for everything that represents Quebec.
And of course, she's not a stranger to the caucus, so she was with you guys for the last 4 years. And what would it mean to have her back personally?
Oh, it will be great. She was one of the MPs working on issues that are still discussed in the House right now. For example, the Curam system, which is costing 4 times what it was supposed to be. She was one of the first ones to raise the flag on this. So there's still files going on that she digged in the first place. So it's going to be a great addition. She's going to work as hard as she did the first mandate. We know that for sure. So we'll be happy to have her back.
I want to ask you about the energy in this room. Before we came on, you were sort of telling me that there are people from not just here in Terrebonne, but from all over.
Yeah, there's a lot of people coming from everywhere, and we could see that during the campaign. I was in the local, the electoral local quite a few times. All the members for the Bloc came 4, 5, 6 times at least doing door to door. But a lot of people from outside as well, by themselves, wanted to be here, and I think it meant something since it was so tight last time, and losing by a vote and having Nathalie fight in the Supreme Court, I think it gave energy to a lot of people, and they wanted to be to the level of the effort she put in the case fighting for democracy. So that I think it appealed to a lot of people, and maybe that's why we're so numerous tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the fact that perhaps the broader geopolitical question is not as important. I remember when those stories came out about the one vote and the mail-in ballots and the errors. I came and spoke to voters at that time in the area, and they spoke a lot about how it had changed their view a little bit and maybe would have changed their votes. How much do you think that whole scandal that went on impacted the way people think about this election this time around?
I think it will have it had an impact. People talked about that to us when we were just discussing in general with them, and I think it was more important this time during this election that they came out to vote. They knew that someone had fought for their right to vote, for every vote to count during the election, and I think they wanted to be up to that exercise that was done by Nathalie, and maybe they feel that this election is a bit different, and they feel maybe more like they need to express their vote since it was so hardly fought for. So I think it will make a difference as well. And we can already see it in the participation rate.
Christine Normandin, thank you very much. Back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. And we do want to tell you a little bit about that ticker on the bottom of your screen. We're now almost an entire year, a year after the last election, an hour since polls closed. So we are getting some very preliminary numbers in. And in both the Toronto area ridings of University-Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest, the Liberal candidates do hold leads. There are few polls reporting, so we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 5% of polls reporting right now. But the lead is tracking, the lead they're holding is tracking with expectations. In Terrebonne, in Quebec, we're not anticipating, full results for a number of hours, at the very least, according to Elections Canada, because it is, as you just heard in that interview, a very tightly contested race. But we are getting some more results in right now. They had been just divided by a single vote until moments ago, and now they're divided by 60 or so votes. We've got the Bloc in the lead in the riding with a number of polls reporting, but certainly not the full picture. So we'll continue tracking those results as they come in. Let's bring in our strategists, Kathleen Monk, Shakir Chambers, and Scott Reid. Scott, I'll start with you. Both Mélanie Joly, the minister interviewed, and then Christiane Normandin, the deputy leader, both of them expressing a lot of optimism that things are going to go their way. What did you take from what they told our reporters?
Yeah, since these numbers are so preliminary, let's just dive into straight speculation and alchemy.
That's exactly what I'm asking you to do. Yeah, that's what you're here for.
I really detected a lot of optimism and confidence coming off of Mélanie Joly. Like, Mel was really sounding to me like someone who was preparing for the arguments as to how they won the riding. She was very careful, so take nothing for granted, giving all the qualifications, but did not strike me as someone who was talking as though she expected to lose, someone who expected to win. Obviously, it's almost impossible to get any kind of eyeball on Terrebonne because there's such a small number of votes, and they're only coming from the advanced polls. But that was the vibe that I got. I personally will be surprised. I know Marco, he crawled into, his doghouse there when he was asked for a prediction. I really will be surprised if the Liberals don't win Terrebonne, just given the sheer force of organizational effort that they've thrown at it, and the fact that they got some popularity.
And that's a 180 on what he said earlier in the show. I'm like, I just want to point that out.
Real-time fact checks.
Literal 180. But that's the thing about this kind of these advanced polls. Listen, I remember, claiming in the 2015, trying to cling on to a Newfoundland riding because there were advanced polls and we just couldn't call the riding yet. But it didn't end up going our way. That was Jack Harris at the time. But they can be tricky. But this phenomenal number of advanced polls really does make it seem like it's a bit of a Liberal shoe-in. And you've got to give it to Mark Carney, not called yet, but he's been so politically effective at expanding his power without actually having to trigger a full general election. Because that was, a possibility for him. Remember, the government could trigger an election themselves. We are in a minority. And the polls would say, Nick would say, that in fact, if he did so, he would get a stomping majority. But he built this advantage, first of all, through the floor crossers. Now, looks like tonight, through these by-election wins, and will form his majority this way.
Do you think that means, Scott touched on this earlier, but do you think that means if, in fact, this plays out as the polls are leading or indicated that will be the case, Shakir, that a general election is off the table?
I think if Carney gets the majority, there won't be an election until 2029, the next scheduled election. I think they're going to work with their majority. As long as there's no one that leaves the Liberal Party for whatever reasons and brings it back down a few seats, I think we're good till 2029. I would just say to Scott's point, I didn't get the arrogance that he's talking about from Joly, or the confidence.
He'd call it confidence. Yeah. Hubris, swagger.
When Evan Solomon spoke, and then the person in Scarborough Southwest, they try to be very humble, like, oh, we feel good, and we'll see what happens. But they know they're going to win those two ridings. It's pretty obvious they're going to win those two ridings. Terrebonne is the one that we have to be concerned about, and I think in that riding in particular, we'll see how it plays out, but it seems like everybody's very, very motivated, and I think Nathan made the point. In that riding in particular, your vote counts. You know, if there's any riding indicative of every vote counts, it's Terrebonne. So we'll see how it plays out. But there's clearly a very high level of motivation from the Liberal side and the Bloc side. I heard Nick Nano say earlier he's looking at the Conservative number to see motivation. I don't think it matters in that riding at all. I think there's two parties that are really battling to win, and we'll see how those voters turn out at the end of the day.
I listened also very closely to Minister Solomon say this is going to happen at the ballot box, right? Again, circling back to the idea that the Liberals tonight want to say we got our majority through the exercise of democracy, not through, you know, the backroom deals that the Conservatives are accusing us of. There's some truth to that, but some part of it is they wouldn't be crossing this threshold without those floor crossers.
And they also wouldn't be winning these by-elections if some of the same dynamics that maybe led to the floor crossers coming over were in place. So that's their talking point for tonight. It's sensible. You don't want to look arrogant. And you do want to emphasize that there's been votes cast by Canadians that have taken it to this point. But they're going to get their majority. We can see that now. I mean, we've even posted it, not confirmed, but we're posting that number, which takes you into majority territory. And I think very quickly they're going to move off of that. It isn't so much about whether you have the majority after tonight. It is going to be the discussion we were having earlier. What are you going to do with it? And how are you going to operate it?
And do you feel like that number is important? Because Shakir was mentioning, Kathleen, like, do people, like, the number has to stay static, but we know Jonathan Wilkinson, for example, out in BC is likely headed to a diplomatic post fairly soon, so then they're down a count, and then what, you know what I mean? Like,
for sure, it's a very Smith, who will be potentially running for the Ontario Liberals. Boularice, exactly.
Like that number quickly changes.
It constantly changes, right. So the thing is, the Liberals wanted to avoid the framing that was being put on these floor crossers. The accusation was that they were being opportunistic or potentially anti-democratic by forming a majority this way. And so this by-election opportunity this evening gives them the opportunity to basically say, no, we didn't do it through backroom deals, we did it through democracy. And then, you know, if the rumors are true, they'll get a whole other swath of floor crossers, which will be the padding that they need, the margin that they needed of error when they have these resignations that are frankly planned and the regular departures that will happen over the course of an election. But we have to see like what Carney does next. And we know that there's a spring economic statement coming soon that will likely be coming up in the next 2 weeks. How will the Liberals form the narrative around that? Will they have new policy drops in the coming weeks to show that this new majority government potentially is moving fast for Canadians?
And we don't know officially if they have that majority government, but certainly as we look at some of these preliminary results, Omar, it is giving the impression, even though there's not a huge percentage of polls reporting, the lead is so sizable in both of the Toronto ridings that it looks very much headed in that direction.
We're seeing more of those polls reporting in the three by-elections. Terrebonne, of course, will be the one to watch, but you can see there that the lead between the Bloc candidate and the Liberal has expanded somewhat. Nathalie Sinclair-Desgagnés has 231 vote lead. There are 13 polls out of 211 that are reporting in Terrebonne at the moment. And Vashi, as you were mentioning, the lead growing for the Liberals in those two Toronto ridings of Scarborough Southwest and University-Rosedale. So we will be, of course, tracking this extremely closely in the minutes to come. You're watching a CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back.
Thanks, Jennifer. And that was some interesting perspective there on the way the Bloc views the riding, the campaign to have unfolded on the ground. Let me show you some of the updated results from Terrebonne because there's more numbers there now. 13 of the 211 polls reporting the lead now growing to 231. So you heard there that the sense that this became a local campaign. And in some ways, perhaps the floor crossing, at least according to the Bloc, may have actually hurt the Liberal candidate in this riding. We'll see whether or not that bears out because we do expect the results to take an awfully long time in Terrebonne. Let's go now to Scarborough Southwest, where Dolly Begum has a substantial lead at this stage. 17 of 188 polls reporting, but that's a 740 vote lead. That is starting to trend in the right direction for Dolly Begum for sure. So let's go to Scarborough Southwest and talk to Thomas Degla. He's there with a guest.
Hey, Rosie, a couple hundred people here in this banquet hall in Scarborough Southwest, keeping their eyes on those monitors at eye level and above here, watching those results come in to see if there will be a projection made very soon in this riding. Sita Sivaskandaraja is one of the many volunteers who has been here this evening, who has actually followed Dolly Begum from the provincial NDP over to the federal Liberals. You've been a supporter of her, volunteering with her since 2018 when she first ran provincially. What's your sense of what drove her to jump from party to party and then jump from Queen's Park now to potentially the House of Commons?
I think she jumped over because I think that's what she thinks is the best position to help speak for the Scarborough Southwest community. And I think there are a lot of things she talked about at a federal level as a provincial person. I think now she has a platform where she can speak on.
How shocked were you when you found out the change, when you found out the news?
I was pretty shocked. I mean, I don't know. I know there's floor crossings that are happening, but then from a provincial to a federal, it was surprising, but it was also like a pleasant surprise because the way Carney now is moving forward with the country and Dolly being part of it.
We have to throw back to studio, but thank you, Sita. Good to meet you, and over to you, Rosie.
Okay, Thomas Degla, thank you so much. We are ready to call a riding in Toronto, which means we are ready to make the call.
You're going to make the call this early when there's 10 polls reporting out of 150.
The CBC News Decision Desk projects a Liberal majority government. Less than a year after the last election, Prime Minister Carney has won his majority, bringing the Liberals their first majority since 2019. It is, at this stage, the slimmest of majorities, cobbled together through those 5 floor crossers and now this riding, and that is the riding of University-Rosedale. There you go. Danielle Martin, a well-known figure in the riding of University-Rosedale. She has been projected elected
out of 150.
by the CBC News Decision Desk, which means that her win has brought Mark Carney a majority government less than a year after he won that election. This is a significant moment for the Prime Minister, certainly for Dr. Danielle Martin, and for the Liberal Party, who has now brought itself up from almost non-existence more than a year ago to forming that first majority in 2019. And I can hear them listening to us, telling them this news, David. What do you make of this day that, we'll just listen in for a minute and then I'll get David's thoughts. She has been projected elected by the CBC News Decision Desk, which means that her win has brought Mark Carney a majority government less than a year after he won the election. It's a bit of a delay, but they're excited at Dr. Danielle Martin, because it would be pretty nice to be the new MP and the person that helped bring the Prime Minister to the majority threshold.
It is remarkable how Chrystia Freeland's resignations keep punctuating this period of Liberal history, because this is her old seat.
Sure is.
That Danielle Martin has now won to put the Liberals at the magic 172, and really the country is in a situation where Mark Carney is the Liberal leader and the Prime Minister of Canada, in no small part because of her resignation as Finance Minister. This completes a remarkable political comeback, Rosie. Mark Carney took over a distressed, toxic asset in the Liberal Party a year and a bit ago, and look at where he is right now, a majority government here in Canada in 2026.
All right, so let's go to University-Rosedale. Dale Manukduk is there. Dale, I think people are pretty pumped, I would imagine.
It is remarkable how Chrystia Freeland...
Well, that's right, Rosie. And you mentioned there is a little bit of a delay, but they're still cheering here once that graphic was put up on the screen. I looked over to the side. I can see Evan Solomon throw a big fist pump up in the air, and lots of supporters here as well. We know this campaign worked hard. They had more than 400 volunteers hit the ground. The campaign says that they knocked on over 100,000 doors as well. This win for Danielle Martin, again, more than 25 years in the making. We spoke to her former mentor, Gerard Kennedy, former MP and former MPP, and says that she was the right pick for the job. We are expecting to hear from her soon. We are told that former Prime Minister Bob Rae will be the one to introduce her. So we are waiting for this, and these cheers, they're still going on. Again, I know there's a little bit of a delay, but you'll still hear the cheers behind me.
Dale Manukduk, thank you for that. The former Premier of Ontario, former Liberal leader, Bob Rae, will be there. I saw him out campaigning with Dr. Danielle Martin, so not surprising that he would also be there to support her tonight. So that's where we are at that razor-thin majority. Mm-hmm. David, it's good enough.
right,
but it's probably not it's probably not where the Liberals.
Let's see if CTV calls it as well.
Some people were asking questions sometimes about the municipal. They didn't know, it's always very complex for people to know exactly what's federal, provincial, municipal. So we had a number of things like this, but globally I would say the cost of living and the global anxiety was one of the major topics.
You talked about the fact that this is a traditional Bloc Québécois riding, has been so for so many years. Of course, it was redesigned, there were changes, but still, overall, a Bloc Québécois riding. Almost 90% of people in this riding are francophones. That's changing, you think? Could it help tonight with the results for the Liberal Party?
Well, I can tell you the demographic in Terrebonne is changing, and that could help the Liberal Party of Canada for sure, because we talk to this electorate, and they see themselves in us. So I think it can help. Is it going to be enough to win? I don't know.
We're seeing up by one again. I guess it could.
Well, anyway, I would say Tatiana was a fantastic candidate, and she was a fantastic MP, and really, this is what people are talking a lot about majority, minority. Now we are majority, but for me, it's like bringing Tatiana back to Ottawa. For me, it's really important because she's young. She learned the job. She was fantastic, and as a Quebecer also, I want to keep my Quebec caucus back to Ottawa.
Thank you so much. I guess it will be a long night. I know you'll still be on edge. I can through the night, as you've told me that. Thank you so much for your time. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Jean-Pierre Boschman with the Federal Health Minister, Marjorie Michel. And we've got some results coming in from all ridings. You can see there the riding of Terrebonne still very close. It keeps going back and forth between the Bloc and the Liberal candidate, which is exactly how close we thought it would be. In the riding of Scarborough Southwest, a different story. The Liberal candidate, Dolly Begum, there with a sizable lead, even though there are still a minority of polls reporting a sizable lead over her closest competitor. That's where we find Adrian Gabriel. He's at Dolly Begum's headquarters in the riding of Scarborough Southwest. Things getting loud there, I see by the look on your face there, Adrian.
Yeah, that's right, Vash. Yeah, the music is blaring. The celebration started early, though. It is still very early in the count. We still do not have a winner yet, as you've just shared with our viewers across the country. Though individuals have been piling in here tonight. Lots of Liberal supporters who've been knocking on doors for Dolly Begum have been arriving. They've been telling me that over the last number of days, as they've been knocking on doors, they've felt that momentum. They felt that support from many here in Scarborough Southwest. Interestingly, former Toronto Mayor John Tory, who historically was a card-carrying Conservative, he was on the campaign trail with Dolly Begum over the weekend. And, she crossed over from the provincial NDP. She was the deputy leader of the provincial NDP as an MPP. She said she wanted to join Mark Carney's government. She wanted to work with him. She felt that she could do the most to help people in Scarborough Southwest by joining the Carney government. Now, we're still waiting to see if that comes to fruition, though this has been a Liberal stronghold, as we've been discussing all night, Vashi, just talking about the history here in this riding. For 10 plus years, Bill Blair held this riding before he was moved to his post in the United Kingdom. So we're still waiting to see. It's early. We're still seeing just some of those early counts of votes coming in here for Scarborough Southwest, though lots of people hooting and hollering here, people having fun. It's a pretty jovial atmosphere here, some going on stage and taking selfies while the crowd cheers. That's the mood that's happening here tonight in Scarborough Southwest.
All right, Adrian, thank you so much. Similar story happening in parallel where CTV's Heather Wright is standing by at the Liberal headquarters of University-Rosedale. And I'm just looking at the numbers right here, and it looks like 11% of the polls are reporting in that riding. Just over, actually, I just changed. 15% of the polls are reporting, and a sizable lead right now, just over 2,300 votes total for Danielle Martin, and that is something that has been growing through the night and expanding through the night. Heather.
Certainly, and the crowd is excited here. You know, you over the course of the night, we've heard from various supporters, various politicians that are here feeling very good about their candidate, about this campaign, and they're seeing those numbers come in, and they're very happy with what they're seeing. Now, it's very interesting being here in University-Rosedale when you think about the MP that Danielle Martin is running to replace, and that, of course, is Chrystia Freeland, who really did start the entire Carney government with her resignation from the Trudeau government about 18 months ago. And so being here in this riding where Chrystia Freeland really, she stepped aside, Trudeau decided to not run in the election, paving the way for Mark Carney to be elected as Liberal leader. It's very interesting being here and seeing that this riding will soon elect their next MP, and it will likely be Liberal Danielle Martin.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. Let's bring in our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Graham Richardson, right now. And certainly listening just to that audio there, Graham, you can almost tell that at those two Toronto ridings, they are preparing for celebration.
We're looking for one of three, and one of the ridings I heard we're up to 15% now. So clearly a trend is happening, and obviously it depends on how you heard Melanie Joly, whether it was confidence or whether it was cautioning that maybe we won't get it in Terrebonne. But as we've been saying, one of the three gets them to 172, 2 or 3 gets them higher. So we'll continue to wait and watch for that. The other thing too that we haven't talked at all about is in context of floor crossings. Like tonight is a night about volunteers and about pulling vote, right? And so when the Conservatives are hit with those kinds of things, you have to think long term about the damage that does to that volunteer base. Now I know they're committed, but you know, this is hard work. This is not easy to do this. On by-election night, it's smaller, arguably, than obviously a full general. But, you know, it's just something I'm thinking about because we're looking at vote being pulled. We're looking at volunteers engaging, right? And so that's the hard part about the bigger story here tonight on the Conservative side is those defections and the impact they're going to have. Because I don't think it's going to go away quickly, regardless of if Mr. Poilievre is able to hold on or not.
They might have some time, though.
They will have time.
Right? If it's not a tomorrow issue for them now, with a majority secured, they have a to their credit, they have a pretty strong volunteer
Very
get
strong.
Up the vote
Yes.
base at this point.
Yep.
Yeah. So lots more results coming in as we take a look at University-Rosedale, as we take a look at Scarborough Southwest, both Liberal strongholds, senior ministers there, and certainly sizable leads for the Liberal candidates, Danielle Martin and Dolly Begum in both of those ridings. Terrebonne in Montreal, just outside of Montreal, very much a more competitive race, one that has been competitive all night, was competitive in the last federal election, and remains so at this hour. Let's swing over to Sandy, who is with our political panel for some more analysis.
Okay, Vashi, everyone here is fascinated by the race in Terrebonne, and at one point, Nick Nanos was invited over here because we had a question for him.
Yeah, the question was, how does the early number on the advance stack up against last year? And I do think it really bears careful examination. So, you know, I say with a heavy caveat, let's see how the rest of the night plays out. And let's see how today goes in terms of the overall turnout. But I agree with what Scott said, notwithstanding the fact that he was making comments about doghouses. I just try to stay out of them, unlike you, Scott. You spend an awful lot of time in there. But I do agree that, you know, Minister Joly and others have projected, I think, some cautious optimism. Either way, I think it's quite remarkable that the Liberal Party has established a presence through the most recent incumbent, Tatiana Auguste. And the real question will be now whether or not they can pull this rabbit out of the hat and now bring her back to Parliament.
James, what do you think? I mean, we were talking about voter turnout, and the question was, why would there be such a large BQ turnout as well, along with the Liberals?
I mean, I suppose a lot of it is machinery politics, a long-lasting, legacy of
parents and kids, like now for Bloc Québécois was first contested the campaigns across Quebec on a broad scale in 1993, right? So you're now going back 30 years of a political party having machinery and families and a bit of a legacy of voting patterns there that is deeply held. So if they can reanimate that and get that vote out, obviously it'd be pretty forceful. But I do kind of retreat back to, I think, Scott's view, right? Which is, if you voted for Mark Carney last year, what has he done in the last year to offend you to not vote for him again? You might be disappointed. You might be really disappointed next year. But right now, nothing has really happened in the last 12 months to make you not vote for Mark Carney again, which puts the Liberals in a good spot. Plus, the Liberals have a machinery advantage and a fundraising advantage more broadly. They had their convention strategically in Montreal. You get those volunteers out to push out and get the final vote out. We have less than 15% of the votes have been tabulated so far. And look, by the way, as a historic parallel, my riding that I used to represent voted Reform Party in 1993, 1997. The Member of Parliament stepped down. We had a by-election in 1998, and the Liberals won it. The Liberals had not won my riding since 1968, but they won it in 1998. Why? Because it was in between election campaigns. It was clear there was not going to be a change in government, and they elected an incumbent sitting mayor of the largest city in my town. Why? Because he knew the community well, and you can get something possibly out of that. So I think in a practical way, we talk about politics at a high level here and what it means for the country and red and blue and all that. Right. But if you're a regular citizen on the ground, the argument of having a government member of parliament who can actually deliver something tangible to your community has meaning.
I have to stop you there, and I owe you one, but I have to throw back to Omar and to Vashi, okay? I won't forget.
Okay, we have some breaking news right now. The CTV News Decision Desk is ready to make a call.
Seem to be a little bit later.
Well, there you have it. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals have formed a majority government, taking the riding of University-Rosedale in Toronto to reach 172 seats.
This is the first Liberal majority government and the first in Canada since Justin Trudeau formed a majority back in 2015. But at this moment in time, it remains a technical majority. The Speaker of the House is Liberal, so that Speaker will still need to cast a vote if things remain stagnant at this point in order to break a tie. But, and I will say it's a big but, that changes if the Liberals win another seat, which they very much look on track to doing. Right now they've clinched University-Rosedale, but in Scarborough Southwest they have a very sizable lead at this point. You can pull up some of the results as we take a look at them right now.
Yeah, and as we just told you, Danielle Martin has been, or projection is that she will win that riding of University-Rosedale. And here's how the numbers are stacking up right now. 35 of 153 polls reporting, and she's got about a 2,100, more than that, vote lead over the NDP candidate. So again, the victory there, clinching Mark Carney's government to majority status. He will be forming a majority. Let's go to CTV's Heather Wright at the Liberal headquarters in University-Rosedale. Heather, I can imagine there's already a sense of elation where you are right now.
Certainly a lot of cheers with the news that Danielle Martin is going to win this seat. Now, I'm speaking quietly because you might be able to see behind me, Bob Ray is addressing the crowd here tonight. Now, Bob Ray is one of the MPs that represented part of this riding during his tenure in the House of Commons. So he is introducing Danielle Martin now, saying that he has known Danielle Martin since before she was born. And so the crowd really excited, enthusiastic, and getting ready to hear the words from the newest MP that is going to go to Ottawa, Danielle Martin.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. And again, just to recap, the Liberals have formed a majority government. They have reached the 172 seats that are needed. Heather Wright, of course, speaking to us from University-Rosedale, which was, of course, the riding that previously belonged to Chrystia Freeland, who has now become an advisor to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, and also taken up a position at Oxford University.
And who was there the day that the campaign kicked off next to Bob Ray, who is in the midst of introducing Danielle Martin to make her victory speech. And we can take you through some other outcomes or some of the other results that we have in. Scarborough Southwest is where our eyes turn next because, of course, though the Liberals have now formed a majority in order to get over that technical majority of 172 and get 173 seats, this is the obvious place to look. You can see how sizable the lead for the Liberal candidate in Scarborough Southwest is for Dolly Begum. Adrian Gabriel is live for us there right now. Adrian, what is your sense on the ground?
Well, the sense on the ground is Lots of excitement here. The room is absolutely packed right now, Vashi. Nate Erskine-Schmidt just walked in. We've got Michael Coteau, Liberal MP here. The President of the Young Liberals of Canada has walked in and introduced himself to me. Lots of big Liberals in this part of the country arriving here in anticipation. They believe that Dolly Begum will be winning tonight. We're still waiting to see. The votes are still in the early stages. You know, she's up against Diana Filipova, is the Conservative who's really right now the closest to Dolly. And now Dolly Begum is a household name here in this part of the GTA. She was an MPP for Scarborough Southwest as a member of the NDP, most recently as a deputy leader of the provincial NDP. So, you know, she really has a strong base already in place here. Previously, she was the first Bangladeshi Canadian ever elected to office in Canadian history. And this is also a riding that is really multicultural. About 64% registered on the latest census as visible minorities. The top three are South Asian community, members of the Black community, as well as the Filipino community. And many of them represented here tonight as they pack in this room. We've had people cheering as they've been seeing some of the early counts of votes coming in on the TV screens as they're watching CTV News Channel right behind us. And we're keeping a close eye.
All right, thank you so much, Adrian. Appreciate it. That's Adrian Gabriel at Dolly Begum's headquarters. That's the Liberal candidate in Scarborough Southwest. And our decision desk can now confirm that Dolly Begum will win that riding, which puts the Liberals at 173 seats officially, 1 seat past what was needed for a majority government. So tonight, a historical night, the first time in Canadian history that a government has gone from a minority to a majority through by-elections. There was a lot more that happened before that, including 5 floor crossers since just November. But essentially, a year ago, we were sitting, Omar, in the same place. The Liberals formed a minority government after a general election. A year later, just shy of 2 weeks, less than a year, the Liberals have now moved to a majority government.
Yeah, they started off this night at 171 seats. Now we are able to project that they will be capturing the riding of Scarborough Southwest, of course, the riding that used to belong to Bill Blair, who is now the Canadian High Commissioner to the UK, and University-Rosedale, the former riding of Chrysler Freeland, which we are able to project tonight is going to Danielle Martin. So the Liberals are able to hang on to those 2 Toronto area ridings, which is why at the bottom of your screen there you see that number at 173, 1 seat past the majority status of 172. The riding that we are all watching tonight, which has been somewhat seesawing, but as of late the Bloc Québécois has been able to expand their lead, is of course the riding of Terrebonne. You will remember, if you go back to last year in April, the Liberals had clinched that riding, but by a single vote. And this February, the Supreme Court of Canada nullified the result in that riding, which is why we are seeing tonight's by-election. So I did momentarily say that the Bloc Québécois had a lead. Look at that picture now, right? There's a 62-vote lead for Tatiana Auguste. So again, a really small lead, but it just gives you a sense of how much seesawing we're going to see through those late evening hours and possibly into the early morning. And in fact, Elections Canada did signal earlier this evening that the result may not come for several hours. So even though the Liberals have their majority this evening with 173 seats, this will be the riding to watch in Terrebonne, which is about 20 minutes outside of Montreal, to see if Tatiana Auguste is able to keep that riding, which she won by single vote last April. So the drama, Vashi.
Which, to be honest, I won't be able to, I'm going to call it here in about 10 or 15 minutes. And now that we've seen those 2, I can't stay up all night to sit here and watch the counting for Terrebonne.
To give who wins their due.
I do hope Walk wins it, though.
18 months ago, you and I, Scott, were on, and Kathleen were on every panel talking about the death of the Trudeau Liberals. They were done. They were over. They were going to win 15 seats. And a year and a half later, they have managed to transform a minority government into a majority government. Like, your take?
Well, it took 2 steps. They thought they were doing it 1 year ago. And now here they are a year later. They finally achieved that majority government. But I want to underscore what you're saying. This has been such an extraordinary, historic, and atypical, unprecedented process. Like, we have rarely seen a political resurrection of the kind that Mark Carney enabled for the Liberal Party. They were done. They were in the ditch and covered with leaves. It was over. And Carney comes onto the stage. Trump intervenes in our politics, barges through like a bull. And here we are a year later with a majority government. All those questions with respect to Donald Trump remain. Prime Minister's got a monster challenge. I mean, we can talk about how great the political run has been for Mark Carney, but man, what a difficult time to be Prime Minister. The challenges are overwhelming.
What materially changes for the voter tomorrow morning?
Nothing. Nothing will materially change for voters. I think if we want to be honest, maybe expectations in a casual way will rise for the government, and they'll say, well, now you got your majority, so you can, like, snap your fingers, let's get a pipeline. Snap your fingers, let's get a port. But I think for most people, the reality is they're going to wake up tomorrow worried about the price of gas and the effect that Donald Trump is having on their day-to-day lives, just like they woke up today.
Is there a cautionary note, though, Shakir, in how much has changed over the last 18 months? Like, can you really be certain that the Trump factor holds in this way, or that the Carney factor holds in the way that it has? It feels like I feel nervous to pronounce anything based on the last year and a half.
No, absolutely. I think when I look at this majority, people are voting on the promise of Mark Carney. You know, I think James said earlier, there's no reason to not vote against him right now, but he hasn't really put anything on the table to say that, wow, this guy's doing a magnificent job, right? So there's a promise that he's going to deliver for you. But there's so many variables out there. There's what happens with Kuzma. There's obviously global instability. There's separatist movements in Alberta and Quebec. There's a potential pipeline, what that does to his caucus and caucus management. There's so many things that are going to come at Mark Carney over the next year or so. How does he manage those things moving forward? I would also add, I think there is a generational divide. With all due respect to Scott, he said numerous times, this war that we're at, you know, against Donald Trump, I'm looking around, I'm pretty sure I'm the youngest person on this panel. I don't think, with all due respect, I don't think people in my bracket view that threat the same way that we view paying rent, buying groceries, you know, things of that, the affordability issue. I think that's just top of the priorities for us, not this battle against the U.S., not Donald Trump. And so we have to see how Carney manages that generational divide that I see on these issues.
You don't think even younger people think that Trump is the accelerant for all of those challenges, or many of those challenges? The
issues that we're facing right now with rent, with food, these things happened way before Donald Trump. You know, I'm not going to sit here and point fingers at the previous government, but I mean, at the end of the day, the Liberals were in power for the past 10 years, and these issues accelerated. Donald Trump sure has been a factor on them, but he's not the cause of some of the issues we're facing on affordability. And I think a lot of youth see that.
But clearly, I don't think people think Mark Carney is either.
Mark Carney's
or he'd be getting pounded tonight.
Mark Carney's not the cause of the issues. I agree with that. They're putting trust in him that he can deal with the cost of living issues. I totally agree with that, for sure. There's a promise that he can do these things. But if he doesn't deliver, if he doesn't start putting numbers on the board, he's going to be in for a world of hurt when we face that next election.
It's interesting also, though, for the non-politician, right, who a year ago everyone was like, is he going to be okay in this politics thing, 100%. The central banker, is he going to, you know, this is really minority government through political maneuvers.
Political maneuvers, yeah, you could almost say...
I'm not saying that negatively or positively, just political maneuvers.
Yeah, on April 29th, 2025, it's like Canadians decided to get engaged to Mark Carney. And tonight, they're getting married. It's like, it's sealing the deal. You know, it's taken almost a year, but they've moved forward, because he was a novice politician. We didn't know who he was. Yeah, whenever we talk about marriage, Scott and I are like, we are not qualified to have this conversation. But I want to draw your eye to something else that we haven't talked about tonight. It's interesting kind of bookends on this story, if you will. Remember, December 16th, 2024, Chrystia Freeland dramatically resigned, right? Which triggered Trudeau's resignation in January of 2025, which opened the door to a leadership race, which brought in, of course, Mark Carney. Tonight, one of the very seats that is up for grabs, which that CTV just declared, University-Rosedale, is her seat. And so it's kind of like this perfect bookend where she actually triggered the race, which allowed Mark Carney to get in, and now is, in fact, helping him by delivering her seat which gives him a majority.
Maybe Mark Carney should have given her more than transport minister.
Maybe.
Just joking. It's just a joke. She's doing lots of things now. Yeah.
All right, let's bring in Heather Butts right now, who is with Nick Nanos. Heather, what have you got?
Thank you so much, Omar. We're going to take a deeper dive right now at the riding of Terrebonne. We've been talking about it all night. So just to let you know where we're standing right now, about 55 of the 211 polls have closed. The Liberals currently in the lead with 229 votes ahead of the Bloc Québécois. So who are the people of Terrebonne? Who are these voters who are making this dramatic shift all night that we've been seeing between those two parties? So we had Environics Analytics break down Terrebonne for us. They broke it down into 12 segments of the population, but we're going to take a look at the top two. So we're going to start with Les Familles. So these people, upper middle income Quebec suburbanites, their average household income about $140,000. They work in the trades, they have diplomas, they typically have school-aged children, anywhere between 35 and up. The other segment of the population that's really driving these results would be the small city singles and couples with modest incomes. Their income averaging about $85,000 per household. Their jobs looking towards trades. They all have diplomas, apprenticeships, and they have issues. They all have typical issues that are really driving this segment of the population. But those two segments really broke down the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois, basically taking 40% each. The average household value of $460,000. If they're paying rent there, around $1,100 per month. When it comes to tariffs, though, the jobs at risk very high. We heard Melanie Joly earlier in the show talk about the automotive sector there, as well as the aluminum sector. Financial vulnerability to tariffs it would be at medium. Food insecurity would be at about 5%. So those are the two people who are really helping those Bloc Québécois and the Liberals battle it out. I want to bring in Nick Nanos now. Nick is going to help us break this down even further. Nick, we want to take a look now at the leadership and where that stands right now. We're going to bring that graphic board up for us. Walk us through this, Nick.
No, so you can see, this shows the plus minus, the vote change when we roll up all of the by-elections, what's happened tonight. And you can see, if you look at Pierre Poilievre, he's down 14 percentage points, and you have the BQ up, the Libs up, the NDP generally flat, no change for the Green Party. The other key thing is that when we look at the riding of Terrebonne, Conservative support is at 3.3%, Heather, a far cry from 18%. So the big question is, where are those Conservative voters? Did they stay home? If they came home, if they went out to vote, who did they vote for? And the other thing is let's face it, if you're a Conservative strategist and you're looking at this number in Terrebonne, 3.3 compared to 18%, you're going to be asking yourself questions, because this is just another signal. I think it's probably fair to say that Pierre Poilievre will not do as well tonight as he did do in the last federal election in these three ridings. And the big question is how will his caucus and how will strategists kind of receive that? But watch the BQ, watch the Liberals, and then we'll watch for the fallout for Pierre Poilievre potentially.
Absolutely. Nick, thank you. We'll throw it back to Omar and Vashi.
All right, Heather, Nick, thank you so much. So if you are Pierre Poilievre tonight, Graham, what are you thinking?
Well, look, to Vashi's point, and to all the millions of Conservatives who voted for him and for the party, he's in a position where there's a lot of people who still believe in him. It appears that he has listened to some of the harsh criticism of his style. He's not chomping apples at local reporters anymore. I'm new old guy, right? I used to work on the Hill many years ago. I was a local anchor. I went away for a while and I came back. The most vigorous outreach to say hello to me and to just chat with the new bureau chief of CTV National News, the Conservatives. So that's a small thing. I don't know if that's going to translate for the public, because politics is kind of like television. The frame sets around you if you're a leader, and once it's on, it's hard to shake off. And so I think he's trying to slightly shake it off by keeping his base. But to Nick's point in Terrebonne, like, that's one by-election. But I was wondering about that big return for them, that 18% in the general. That's big in that riding. And now, what was the number? Like it's down to 2. It's like that vote disappeared. So if that's a trend around the country, that's obviously a problem. Again, one riding. It's not going to happen in the prairies. It's not going to happen in Alberta. But in order to win, like Harper, he's got to punch into those big cities. Is he further away from that now tonight than he was before the by-elections?
I would argue that tonight is not as important as the next few days and the next few weeks, only because they anticipated this outcome.
Yes.
They have for a long time. We've all been talking about this possibility ever since the by-elections were called. I think what matters next is if there are more people who leave the Conservative Party.
Totally agree.
If there are more MPs who cross the floor to the Liberals, who now see this as a signal that they can or they should or whatever it ends up being, that will be harder to withstand. Yeah.
And sorry, Omar, and 4 in 5 months is a lot. If that becomes more, even though we've said he's got the party, you got to hold caucus.
Well, and that was exactly my point. I mean, that completely negates the overwhelming endorsement that he got from his party, right? What was something like 80-90%? And so if you have this drip of people leaving your caucus, people are going to be wondering, how can you manage them? What sort of inspiration are you providing them? So that is certainly going to be a big question. For Mark Carney, though, we've touched on this earlier this evening. Marjorie Michel was talking about this earlier this evening with Geneviève Beauchemin. The fact that when she was knocking on doors, people described Mark Carney as somebody who was a reassuring figure. Not surprising that she would speak so glowingly of her boss this way. But at a certain point, you have to get results, not just reassurance. What has he got to do now as of tomorrow?
Well, I think we're going to see something from him. I gather a major announcement coming, apparently on an affordability issue. We can all guess what that might be. The other thing, I mean, he's got to show results. The switch from minority to majority is I agree with Scott and others who said that mechanically for the public it doesn't mean much, but the narrative does change. I'm here for at least 3 more years, maybe 2.5, whatever it's going to be. That's a long time as opposed to a minority where you could go down. Now everybody's got to stay healthy. The margin's still small.
Yeah.
Things can happen, so it's not easy street, but it is a different story. And his story has been very successful. And again, I keep saying it. It's not going to last forever. This is a longer honeymoon, I would argue, and extraordinary times. But when it goes, what's that going to look like? And it will go. It always goes for governments, regardless of stripe.
Mm-hmm. All right, Graham, thank you. You are watching a CTV News special, Federal By-Elections 2026. The Liberals have won 2 by-elections to hit the 173 seat point. That majority status was 172, so that they have surpassed that by 1, and they have formed a majority government.
We're going to continue tracking reaction and share it with you as it comes into the newsroom. Right now, we've got to take a quick break. We're still waiting for results from Terrebonne. We'll be back with those next.
Okay, let me just check the live results on Terrebonne just before we go.
It's the month of rain.
Liberals are leading 8,300 to 7,800. So there's now a 500 vote lead for Liberals in Terrebonne. Obviously, it's going to take a while to count all those votes. I imagine they'll probably be up for another few hours at least, if not 4 hours, probably roughly, before you get a final result on Terrebonne. Might even not even be till the next day. It might take a whole 2 days or so just to count. And if it's too close, if it's in within 1% or 2% of a margin, then they actually do a recount or whatever. So, yeah. It's what it is. Carney got his majority. He won those 2 ridings, one of them being a Liberal safe stronghold anyway, and it's Toronto, so they usually vote Liberal, is what it is. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and watching. I appreciate all the super chats as well. I don't know if some of you guys are still in the chat, but thank you, John Godey. Thank you, Harman Singh. Thank you, Vince. And thank you, Miss Canadian. Really appreciate you guys with the extra support. And I will see you guys tomorrow for question period. There are some committees on early in the morning, but most of them are just there's no good topics. To be honest, all the committees tomorrow are pretty bad. Most of them are just doing draft reports, and the other ones that aren't are just blah. So we'll probably just cover question period tomorrow, and that'll be that. So I will see you guys at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Thanks, guys. See you. Have a good night and evening. And, yeah, try to wash off the Carney majority because, yeah, it kind of sucks. But whatever. What can we do about it? Okay. Bye, guys. See you.